Thank you. Good evening, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the January the 4th Planning and Development Committee meeting. This is the first meeting of the year, so Happy New Year to all of our dedicated YouTube viewership. I'm sure there are thousands of you out there, and I hope you'll enjoy this meeting. Moving right on into the agenda, Alicia, you said that all councillors are here with the exception of Councillor Wheat.
That would be correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. And whilst we have the opportunity, we'd like to wish Councillor Wheat a speedy recovery from his recent surgery. If he's watching tonight, welcome. If not, we wish him very well. Could somebody move approval of the agenda? Mayor Bailey, seconded by Councillor Pearce. Does anybody want to add anything to the agenda this evening? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. Motion carried. If anybody has a pecuniary interest, if they could declare it either now or at the appropriate time. Item 4, delegations, petitions, presentations. I think, Alicia, we have none, but we have quite a few for individual items. Is that correct?
That would be correct, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. So moving on to adoption of the minutes from the meeting of December the 7th, 2021. Could somebody move those minutes? Councillor Ferrier, seconded by Councillor Miller. Does anybody have any comments, amendments, adjustments they'd like to make?
Write it nice.
If somebody has got his microphone on, I wish they'd hope they would mute, please. So seeing no comments, I would like to call the vote. Those in favour? Motion carried. Is there any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none, I'll move straight on then to the public hearings under the Planning Act to receive information from the public. We have one item in this category, and it is in regard of 1130 to 1146 Colborne Street East. And Amanda, I think you're leading us on this one.
Yeah, can you just confirm that you can see my presentation?
I can indeed.
Excellent, thank you, Chair. So thank you through the Chair. An application for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment has been received from the IBI Group for the lands municipally known as 1130 to 1146 Colborne Street East in Canesville. The subject lands are located on the north side of Colborne Street and are adjacent to the city of Brantford. The subject lands are rectangular in shape and has a combined frontage of approximately 164 meters along Colborne Street and in a site area of approximately 1.6 hectares. The applicant is proposing to construct a residential development with flexibility for retail. The applicant is specifically proposing a 6-story apartment building with approximately 101 units, 23 story townhouses and 32 3-story stacked townhouses. The applicant is also proposing 259 parking spaces, 121 being surface parking and 138 being underground. And then in terms of studies prepared for the proposed development, the applicant has prepared the following studies and reports, which are currently being reviewed by commenting agencies, including the city of Brantford. They have prepared a functional servicing report, grading plan, a noise feasibility study, planning justification report, a servicing plan, shadow study, a survey, transportation impact and parking study, urban design guidelines, a site plan, and have prepared an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. And then in regards to the official plan, the subject lands are designated as general commercial. The applicant is proposing to amend the designation from general commercial to site-specific policy area urban residential with a holding provision for the entire subject lands for greater than 3 years due to servicing capacity. The proposed urban residential designation permits the proposed residential dwelling types. And then in regards to the zoning bylaw, the subject lands are currently zoned as general commercial, and the applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands to holding residential multiple high density with site-specific provisions to facilitate the development. And then in regards to next steps, through public circulation, one public comment has been received so far, seeking clarification on servicing. And then in terms of next steps, comments from commenting agencies will be compiled and provided to the agent and applicant for the review and response. And then staff will review the material submitted and comments received and prepare a forthcoming recommendation report for committee and council. I'm happy to answer any questions the committee members may have.
Amanda, thank you very much for that presentation. Does committee have any questions for Amanda? Councillor Chambers and then Councillor Miller.
Just through you, Mr. Chairman, I'm just seeking clarification. I'm assuming that this will hold true for all of the applications, but the application will be judged on its merits according to the official plan that is currently in place. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that is correct. Applications are reviewed against the policies that are in place at the time of the submission. So in this situation, it would be the current official plan.
So if time carries on and our new official plan is adopted and this application is still in process, it doesn't change the application according to the official plan. Is that correct?
Through the chair, that's my understanding.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chambers. Councillor Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just because it is adjacent to the city and you circulated, I guess you circulated the application to the city, but I'm just curious, Amanda, through you, Mr. Chair, if there's residents in another municipality, in this case, residents within the 120 meters, say in the city of Brantford, they would get a notice as well?
Thank you to the chair. The residents in the city of Brantford, they were circulated as part of a complete application. We obtained their addresses and their information from the city of Brantford clerk and circulated them notices as well.
Thank you. Yeah, we don't normally see this every day, so okay, appreciate it.
Thank you. Any additional questions to Amanda? Councillor Gatwood.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to Amanda. The question asked by one of the letter writers was about the sanitary servicing. And I'm wondering, there is a servicing plan that's been submitted by IBI Group. Was there mention at our official plan meetings that the boundary adjustment deal didn't allow? I seem to recall them saying it didn't allow for servicing of residential and just commercial and industrial. Is that correct?
Thank you through the chair. In my upcoming recommendation report, I'd have to provide a little more information on that. I'm not too familiar with the servicing agreement, so I don't want to provide incorrect information at the information meeting at this time.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. And Matt's here. I don't know if he wants to shed any more light on that.
Go ahead, Matt.
Through the chair, I was going to say the same thing. No, Amanda answered that great. I'm not sure about that, but it's something that we would include as part of our recommendation.
Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions, I'll then ask if the applicant or the agent of the applicant would like to present. And if they would, if they could just give us their name and address and then proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mr. Mayor, members of the council. My name is John Arians. I'm a planner with the IBI Group. I'm joined this evening with another planner from my Hamilton office, Riti Hager. Between Riti and myself, we have a very brief PowerPoint presentation. We understand that this is a public information meeting and we look forward to answering any questions that council or members of the public may have. First of all, Happy New Year to everyone, and I'm certainly pleased to be back in Brant County with another exciting development project. The property is in the Canesville area, and Councillor Gatwood is absolutely correct. There is a servicing agreement with the city of Brantford that ultimately will extend sanitary services and increase the capacity in this immediate area. In anticipation of that, our client has asked us to come up with a redevelopment scheme for these lands, which would see more residential development, given the fact that, of course, Highway 403 is open This is former Colburn Street. Traffic is significantly reduced, and the ability to have commercial uses as standalone uses is severely diminished. So we do have a redevelopment scheme which is primarily residential. We have proposed a holding zone to accompany that application, given the fact that the sanitary servicing extensions are going through an environmental assessment as we speak. So without further delay, I'll turn it over to Ritzy to give a brief description of the subject property, and then I'll describe the development in more detail.
Alyssa, if you could turn on to the next slide, please. Good evening, councillors. As seen in the aerial image on the screen, the subject lands are located along the north side of Colburn Street East, between the intersections of Garnet Road and Blossom Avenue in the settlement area of Cainsville, which is situated in proximity to the city of Brantford. As Amanda stated, the subject lands are rectangular in shape and have an approximate area of 1.6 hectares. Surrounding the subject lands to the east, south, and west are commercial and residential uses along Colburn Street, while the rail trail is located to the north, separating the subject lands from the single detached dwellings in Brantford. Next slide, please. Currently, the subject lands are occupied by the Crossroads Antique Market, otherwise known as a trading post, Little Louis Eats and Sweets, and one single detached dwellings. There are 3 entrances servicing the subject lands, which are proposed to be maintained. Next slide, please.
So the development proposal before you includes a 6-story apartment building. And on the ground floor of that apartment building, we've identified what's known as flex space. Flex space is a floor area that could either be residential or it could be commercial or offices in the future. At this point in time, our client is concerned that commercial viability is not quite there along this section of Colburn Street, and therefore flex space is being suggested so that, you know, as the market evolves and commercial development may be more viable, the ground floor does have the opportunity to become commercial or office use. Otherwise, it would remain residential. So it's a 6-story apartment building, and the apartment building would range between 90 and 100 units. The ultimate design, of course, would be determined as part of the site plan process. The development also includes 23-story townhouses. These are conventional townhouses, which, you know, have the units side by side. And then we have 2 buildings of 3-story stacked townhouses, which contain 32 units. Stacked townhouses, in my opinion, can best be described as garden apartments, where it's a stacking of units on top of each other and beside each other, more similar to a small apartment building than really townhouses, but technically they are known as townhouses. There are 121 parking spaces proposed underground, primarily for the apartment building. And then we also have 138 surface parking spots. Next slide, please. So this just provides some images of what the development can look like. And of course, ultimately, it will be going through a site plan process. The 2 images on the top are a modern, recently constructed 6-story apartment building. Very unique design with the colors, the renderings, the entrance at the corner. It's this type of building that our client envisions for this property. The image at the lower left is the stacked townhouse development. And as I indicated, it really, you know, better fits a definition of garden apartments rather than conventional townhouses. And the conventional townhouses are shown in the image on the right-hand side, 3-story regular townhouses, each of them with an attached garage. The stacked garden apartment units actually have surface parking in the back. These units do not have attached garages. Next slide, please. Amanda has given you an overview of the development. On the right-hand side, we have the 6-story apartment building. And one thing I would like to point out is that the setback between the apartment building and the rail trail is approximately 11 meters. On top of that, the rail trail is 30 meters wide, so that we have a separation distance of about 42 meters to the backyards of those residences to the north. Now, typically, we as planners use an angular plane analysis, which is a tool we use to ensure that privacy and overlook are not impacted on adjacent lower densities. And with such a large, substantial separation distance, a 45-degree angular plane should result in at least a 12-story building. What's proposed is only a 6-story building, and clearly great separation distances are being provided, and privacy and overlook to the single-family homes on the north side of the trail are diminished. At the right-hand side of the site plan, you'll see that there's an entrance beside the apartment building. That is the entrance that leads to an underground parking garage completely underneath the apartment building. Towards the center of the property, we have a driveway which will be shared by the surface parking for the apartments and the townhouses. You see the two stacked 3-story buildings right along Colburn Street. And then along the back and the driveway at the side, that's where the conventional 3-story townhouses are proposed. And visitor parking is also being provided along that common entranceway. As Ms. Hayter pointed out, the subject lands currently have 3 entrances on Colburn Street, and we would propose to maintain those 3 entrances. Next slide, please.
As part of the official plan and zoning bylaw amendment application, the following studies were completed: an urban design study, transportation impact study, which includes a parking and loading analysis, a noise study, a sun shadow study, and a functional servicing report. All of these studies support the proposed development. Specifically, the sun shadow study showed that none of the backyards within the low density subdivision to the north would be impacted. In terms of the functional servicing study, there is no raining capacity in the Kanesville Municipal Wastewater Lagoons. Therefore, a Class EA is currently undergoing to look at the various alternatives to provide wastewater to Kanesville for the design horizon of 25 years. The preliminary approach is a sanitary pumping station to pump wastewater to the city of Brantford. As John stated, we have proposed a holding provision on the subject lands. Next slide, please.
So, Councillor Chambers hit on an excellent point about which official plan applies, and it currently would be the existing official plan. Having said that, this proposal is consistent with the new official plan that the county is preparing. But we are proceeding with an official plan amendment application at this time. And you're probably saying, well, why, Arians? Why aren't you going to wait for the new OP to take effect? And the answer is quite simple. We still would require an amendment to the new official plan because it mirrors a holding provision that requires holding provisions not to be in place for longer than 3 years. We have no guarantees that the servicing that's going through the EA will in fact be approved and will be implemented. And for that reason, a longer holding provision may be necessary. I would also point out that we also have no guarantees that your official plan will be approved by the province. And it's been my experience on other municipalities, and this is no fault of the county, that the new official plan process can be longer, it can be a little bit more onerous, it requires provincial approval. And while your official plan is going at a good pace and for all intents and purposes will be approved later this spring, again, we have no guarantees. And on top of that, we still need a zoning amendment to implement this development. So that is, for these reasons, our client has decided to proceed with a site-specific official plan and zoning applications so that we're basically getting this parcel as far along or as close to the finish line as possible so that as soon as the servicing is in place, the holding can be removed and they can go immediately towards a site plan application. Next slide.
In conclusion, the proposed development and applications are appropriate as they're in line with the vision contained within the draft County of Brant official plan, which shows that the subject lands are designated community node, which permits this type of development. The introduction of residential units are more in line with existing conditions along Colburn Street East, which have reduced traffic due to the construction of Highway 403, resulting in the lack of viability for primarily commercial and employment uses. The introduction of residential uses will create a complete community in Kingsville by adding residential uses to complement the existing commercial and employment uses, while adding differing housing typologies to the area. Next slide. Thank you all for listening, and we are available to take any questions.
John and Ritzy, thank you very much for that presentation. Let me hand it back to committee. Does committee have any questions of John or Ritzy? Firstly, Councillor Pearce, then Councillor Gafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thank you for the presentation. I think this would be a good fit in that location myself. One question I have, as far as parking, so you're talking 259 spots, 121 of them are underground, which is fine. I'm assuming the underground parking will not have any visitor parking with it. It doesn't really show on your maps anywhere. Are you able to let me know how many visitor parking spots you're looking at here?
Through the chair, certainly. The 20 standard townhouses will each have their own driveway and their own garage. So they will have 2 parking spots per unit. For the 32 stacked townhouses, we're proposing 1 space per unit. We have 54 surface parking spots available in that townhouse block. So deducting the 32 would leave 22 spaces available for visitor parking in the townhouses. For the apartment buildings, sir, you'll see that we've identified a range of apartments from 93 to 100. And it really depends on the ratio of 1-bedroom to 2-bedroom units. Your zoning bylaw requires 1.25 space for a 1-bedroom unit and 0.35 spaces for visitors. Whereas for a 2-bedroom unit, it's 1.4 spaces per unit plus the 0.35. So if they were all 1-bedroom units, we would need 1.6 parking spots. And if they were all 2-bedroom units, we would need 1.75 spaces per unit. The design of this building was premised on the parking, and we have 163 parking spaces for the apartment. So that's why we have a range of between 93 and 100 units, depending on that ratio. But the 0.35 visitor parking spots will be provided for that apartment building entirely as well. So there should be more than ample parking for both the townhouses and the apartment buildings here.
Okay, thank you for that.
You're welcome.
Thank you, John. Councillor Gafford.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, through you to John or Betsy. On page 19 of our package, the overhead of the subject lands that shows the City of Brantford boundary and the subdivision that's opposite. I noticed that there's an access there to the trail from the city lands. And I was looking on the site plan that you have provided, and I'm wondering, is the access to the trail where the phase 2 development line is on the plan?
So through the chair, that's an excellent comment, and obviously that rail trail is a fantastic resource that's available for both the county and the city. We are proposing in a servicing connection because that trail would also function as our storm outlet because the entire site drains towards the trail. As part of the site plan process, we would also hope to negotiate a pedestrian access directly onto the trail so that this development would be able to take full advantage of that wonderful resource rather than having to go around the block to access it.
Great. I'm glad to hear that because I thought that the ideal spot might be where that development phase limit line is, where there's a landscaped area and it's kind of almost the middle of the plan. And that's a GRCA trail. Is that not correct?
That's correct, Councillor. It's owned by the Conservation Authority. We've secured their permission for a storm outlet, and I'm pretty confident we'll be able to secure the permission for pedestrian access, but ultimately it's their decision. Eh?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Thank you, John. Any additional questions for John and Ritzy? Seeing none, if you could just hang around, John and Ritzy, you may be called upon to answer some questions to public comments. I'll now open this meeting up to the public. Alicia, do we have anybody online that would like to speak?
We do not have anyone registered to speak on this item, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Well, just for the sake of appropriate process, I'll ask a second time if there's anybody online that would like to speak to this from the public. I'll ask a third and final time. Seeing none, then I'll close the this public section of the meeting and hand the matter back to committee. Councillor Coleman, would you like to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move this report be accepted for information.
Thank you. Do I have a seconder? Councillor Mayor Bailey? Do we have any additional questions before we call a vote? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. Those in favour? Thank you. John and Richie, thank you very much. This matter will now go back to staff and they will work together with yourself and the public and bring forward a recommendation to a subsequent planning and development committee meeting. Thank you very much and good evening to you.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you.
So I'm going to close the this information session down and move to section 8, which is public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. And we have 6 items on the agenda this evening. The first one is in regard of 517 Paris Road, and Ryan, I think you're going to lead this one, lead us through this one.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll share my presentation now. Just confirm that my presentation is visible.
Now it is, yeah. You're going to blow it up a bit?
Okay.
Yeah, good.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The subject lands are located on the south side of Paris Road, east of Oak Park Road. The lands currently contain a single detached dwelling and are approximately 0.45 hectares or 1.11 acres in size. The subject lands are situated within the primary urban settlement area of Paris and are designated general commercial in the County of Brant official plan. The applicant is proposing to rezone the subject lands from rural residential RR to general commercial C2 in order to permit the development of a gas bar, convenience store, and drive-through restaurant. This application was previously brought forward for information presentations at the October 2017 Planning Advisory Committee meeting, and again at this past September 2021 PDC meeting. At the time, the applicant was requested to submit a complete site plan application in order for staff to review the detailed studies associated with the proposal. The applicant has submitted a number of technical studies and drawings, including a traffic impact study, noise study, environmental site assessments, photometrics plan, and planning justification report, among other items, in order to address many of the comments and questions that have arisen. The applicant was also requested to host a virtual neighborhood open house, which took place on November 16th, 2021 at 6:30 p.m. There have been several questions that have arisen regarding the conflicting official plan designation and the zoning of the subject lands. The official plan for the County of Brant is the county's tool to guide planned change and physical development of the county over the future planning horizon. The county's official plan provides direction for future development and addresses topics such as permitted uses and development policies, which are ultimately implemented by the county's zoning bylaw. The zoning bylaw dictates which form of development can take place at the present time, and can be amended through a zoning bylaw amendment application, which is what we're dealing with through this particular application. Staff note that the most up-to-date site plan drawing was received after notices were circulated to neighboring landowners. Staff have made an effort to ensure concerned residents receive the published agenda, which includes this most updated site plan. Some key revisions to the proposed plan include the removal of the diesel truck fueling pump on the south side of the gas bar. The applicant has also offered additional landscape buffering and has proposed to extend the acoustical fence along the south and easterly property lines to provide buffering from adjacent residential uses. Staff is of the opinion that based on the analysis contained within this report, the proposal has merit, as it is consistent with provincial policy and meets the general intent of the County of Brant official plan. Staff is therefore recommending that this application be approved. Thank you. This concludes my remarks. I'll be happy to take any questions at this time.
Ryan, thank you for your presentation. Questions, Ryan? We'll start with Councillor Howes, then Councillor Ferrier.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ryan. I appreciate that you went over this in some detail in your comments, but I just wanted to, but it was fairly quick, and I wanted to just reiterate the difference between zoning and designation for the benefit of everyone in our audience. To put it simply, would it be fair to say that zoning is more of a related to the current rules attached to a property, whereas designation is more related to the future of the possibilities for the land, any land? And in this case, am I correct in recalling that the designation for this land within the current official plan has been commercial for almost 10 years?
That, to you, Mr. Chair, I believe Councillor Howes is correct on both counts.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Ryan. Ryan, to your knowledge, was anybody from the county, any staff? I know I don't believe I was, and I know Councillor Howes wasn't either. Invited to the November 16th community meeting?
Yes, through you, Mr. Chair, I attended the meeting in an observational capacity, I suppose you could say. We, as well as the applicant, apologize. It was scheduled, I think, on a conflicting evening with another committee night. But that was, we did notify council of that conflict, and I did attend.
Okay, as an observer, would you be able to tell us your impressions on that public meeting, that community meeting?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think it'd be most appropriate for me to characterize it as many of the same concerns that we have seen in the submissions were voiced at that meeting, and I'll leave it at that. It's okay.
Well, that's fair. Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair, to Ryan. At the last meeting, the information meeting, I brought up a number of concerns regarding gas stations and the environment and what they do to when they're close to homes. I'm wondering if, I've gone through this twice now, and I see, other than it doesn't conflict with the environmental policy of the overarching provincial policy, I don't see anything addressing any of those concerns around environmental impact. Yes, there's a thing about environmental impact, but just to say, we support the environmental and agricultural protection and conservation objectives in the plan. But can you speak to any of those from your point of view as staff?
Through you, Mr. Chair, generally speaking, we would follow the provincial directive. And the province does license gas bars through the TSSA. In terms of potential environmental impacts, we generally, through land use planning, defer to the provincial regulatory bodies such as the Technical Safety Authority. I don't know if Matt wants to chime in as well.
Everyone's stealing the words right out of my mouth through the chair. That's what Ryan's correct. When it comes to gas stations, municipalities would regulate land use if there was, natural heritage features or hazards nearby. We would require an EIS for our own review. But when it comes to the installation or decommissioning of a gas station, that gets up to provincial review and approval. And I think the applicant is here. They might be able to answer that process a little bit better than what we might be able to.
And my last question, if I might, before the applicant ends up speaking, is that okay, Mr. Chair?
Sure.
My understanding is the process is they'll have the chance after they present as well. It says here in the third-party report around the second traffic analysis, which was completed at our request from the October meeting, that the conclusion around traffic is that utilizing traffic counts, the report concluded that the existing lane configuration along Paris Road and Oak Park Road should be acceptable to meet site demands. Now, we have approved the other nearby development, and again, should is not will, but we were talking about issues with maybe needing a signalized intersection there. This second traffic analysis still doesn't take into account the approved development of the other center nearby that came at the same meeting, does it?
My understanding is that my understanding is that the traffic study was conducted in conjunction with the site down the road at 539 Paris Road. And in discussions with our general manager of Public Works and Operations, Rob Walton, the signalized intersection at Paris Road and Oak Park is projected to be installed, I think, with 2026, within about four to 6 years, I think is the plan at that section. So we will have an improved signalized section of the road at that location.
So just to clarify one last thing, Mr. Chair, if I can.
Sorry, I do need to make a quick correction. It's not, Ryan quickly corrected me, which I'm thankful for. It is not a signalized intersection. What is being planned there is a roundabout. Sorry.
Oh, okay. But then just to say, and through Councillor Bell, would it be correct then to say, when they said it should be acceptable as it currently stands, that's not including the inclusion of a roundabout in 4 or so years, which would improve traffic flow even more so?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. That's good clarification. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Before I go back to Steve, does anybody would like to speak first time? Councillor Chambers.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I wonder if the planner could just go back to his slides briefly, because I want a clarification and an explanation on where the greater growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe comments are. The growth plan 2020, supporting complete communities. I'm wondering if you could just elaborate on what that actually means in terms of complete communities. It seems to be a new planning buzzword. It's vague there. I'm wondering if you could elaborate for clarification.
Sure. Through you, Mr. Chair. Yeah, you're correct. The term complete communities is a common one you'll see through especially provincial policies. Complete communities is the idea of providing for all of the amenities, commercial, institutional, recreational, and employment type uses within a community for someone to live, play, and work. And that's the idea that, and we have a variety of amenities available within the municipality in order for a community to thrive and within its own context. Hopefully that helps clarify.
And I'm just wondering if you could elaborate on community. There's the Brant County community, there's the urban community, there's the rural community, there's all kinds of different communities. I'm just wondering what this actually refers to in terms of community.
Sure, through you, Mr. Chair. Given the context of this site located within the primary urban settlement area of Paris, I would refer to it as the Paris community.
So we look at this in terms of community by community rather than municipally in terms of measuring whether we are achieving complete communities. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think that's correct. Different contexts within which you could interpret that policy. I think, for example, you could look at complete communities within the municipal context of the county as a whole. We try to accomplish larger employment growth within the county as a whole. When we're looking at the local level, you're looking at the types of amenities that the residents will want to utilize, as well as employment opportunities within the immediate Paris community. Yes.
And in order to meet the criteria for the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe, the metric is based on the municipality achieving being a complete community. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I think, as I stated previously, we're looking at this, in several different ways, but generally you're looking at the community of Paris. Again, the primary urban settlement of Paris, that's the urban settlement area of Paris that's designated in the OP. That is how we would look at that.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You can take the slide off again. Thank you. There are no further first round questions. I'll go back to Steve.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Just two more follow-ups from the staff perspective. Ryan, you mentioned earlier that there were a number of studies completed by the applicant to support their application. Obviously, are all of those studies available to all county residents, and how do they access those? And then I have one more question.
Through you, Mr. Chair, that's correct. We would invite any member of the public to make inquiries directly to us, planning@brant.ca, and we'll be glad to provide any specific study that they're interested in, any study that's submitted in support of the site plan or zoning application or public information.
Thank you. And lastly, I noticed in the most recent site plan, the applicant had opted to remove the diesel pumping station within the gas station, which I know was a big concern with neighbors, and it's great to see the applicant listening to the neighbors on that issue. My understanding is the removal of that was voluntary on the part of the applicant. Would we then be, and I'm not saying that this is their intention, not at all, but I'm just saying in terms of the rules and the formalities, is there anything stopping the applicant or a future owner of this property of bringing back a diesel pumping station? Like, is there some kind of rule that we can attach if this zoning change goes through to prohibit that?
Through you, Mr. Chair, it's an interesting question. I can't think in my career of a time that we've had to narrow down the zoning to that degree of, that specific provision. One thing I can note is that, through the site plan approval, if, for example, this was approved and staff finalized the site plan and it was registered, that site plan would be binding and apply to all future owners. And therefore, they wouldn't be able to go in and just add one without a site plan amendment. That being said, if there was an appetite to write in some site-specific provision to specifically prohibit truck refueling, we have to look into that. And again, I apologize, I just don't have a good solution off the top of my head because, you have passenger vehicles that use diesel as well. So we'd have to kind of think about how we'd frame that.
Okay, thank you, and I appreciate the distinction, and I think it's the truck refueling that was the issue, not so much individual vehicles. So thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Before I go to the agent of the applicant, I have two quick questions. Some while ago, we approved a gas bar about 500 meters down the road to the east. It was a Pioneer station, if I recall correctly. Can you give us an update on the status of that station?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I confirmed with my colleague, Mr. Mizniak, that their site plan technical review is still ongoing. It's been going on for quite some time now, but there's some technical items to address with their engineering as well as the improvements to Paris Road. I think I alluded to this last time we were here. There's some improvements to the turning lane that extends into the city of Brantford, and that is quite the undertaking. So they're still ongoing with their site plan approvals.
So as far as we know, it's still the intention to build that gas bar.
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. Second question, we are going to upgrade the services to this area. Is that still on schedule for 2022?
Through you, Mr. Chair, I can't comment on servicing. That'd be a good question for Rob Walton, but I don't see him here. I don't know if Matt knows off the top of his head, but I apologize. I don't have that.
Okay, well, if you could let us know sometime this evening, that would be helpful. Okay, then I'll move on to the applicant or the agent of the applicant, if they would like to come in. I can see Urban in Mind. There we are. Yeah.
Hello.
If you could introduce yourself, give us your name and company, and then if you have a presentation, please go ahead.
Yeah, my name is Jacob Dickey, and I'm joined by Terrence Glover. We're urban planners from Urban in Mind Planning Consultants, and we're acting as the agent for the owner. I put together a presentation, so I'm just gonna share it here. 1 second. Okay, is everyone able to see?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect. Okay. All right, so this is for as you know, it's for a zoning bylaw amendment application that would result in the creation of a commercial development involving a convenience store, gas station, and drive-through takeout restaurant. Beginning with the site context, as Ryan has mentioned, the site, here we have an aerial image of the subject property, which is highlighted in red. The site has a total lot area of 0.47 hectares, 1.18 acres, with frontage onto both Oak Park Road and Paris Road, and is occupied by a vacant single detached dwelling. Situated halfway in between Paris and Brantford, the property is located within a unique area, given that it is surrounded by a mix of rural residential, agricultural, commercial, and employment-related uses. However, as per the official plan, it is the county's intention to see this particular area become more urbanized in order to support the surrounding economic activities and to create better synergies with other redevelopment projects that will occur along any one of these two major roadways. Right, here we have a street view image of the site. This one is from Paris Road, which acts as a major connector between Paris and Brantford, in addition to the Highway 403. This gives the site an extra level of public exposure, and as such, the site merits a special form of development that can capitalize off of this added public exposure. And this is why we believe that a gas station, drive-through restaurant, and convenience store would be ideal for this location. This street view image is taken from Oak Park Road, and Oak Park Road provides connections to the employment areas situated to the south. And as you can see, the site is largely underdeveloped. It's currently only occupied by a vacant single detached dwelling. And as such, the site merits a more intense form of development that will fit in well with the future vision for the area, which is intended to see significant growth in terms of employment and commercial services. Moving on to the policy context, starting at the provincial level, you have the growth plan for the Greater Golden Horseshoe. The site is located, it's within the Paris urban settlement area, but visually on the map, you can see it in between here Paris and Brantford. And the goal of the growth plan is to promote infill development in order to curb urban sprawl and prevent the future fragmentation of agricultural lands and the Greenbelt area. The proposal accomplishes this by converting an existing single detached lot into a viable commercial development that will make for a more efficient use of land and resources while also supporting the everyday needs of local residents and workers. Not only will this commercial development benefit those who are traveling along Paris Road or Oak Park Road, but it will also provide for new employment opportunities while also acting as a destination for the local community for those who want to grab a quick meal or run a quick errand. According to the Brant County official plan, the subject property is located within the general commercial land use designation, highlighted in pink here, just above the employment area. The uses that we're proposing, that being the gas station, restaurant, drive-through takeout restaurant, and convenience store, are all permitted within the official plan's general commercial land use designation. Moving on to the zoning bylaw, the subject property is currently located within the rural residential zoning category, which only allows for single detached dwellings. We're proposing to rezone the site to general commercial, which allows for a wide variety of different commercial uses. Essentially, our zoning bylaw amendment would bring the site into conformity with the official plan's commercial zoning. And here is the original site plan or concept plan that was submitted with the initial zoning bylaw amendment application. As Ryan has mentioned, there have been a number of revisions that have occurred since this time based on feedback received from residents throughout the public process and from municipal staff's ongoing review of our site plan control application, which is currently underway. And here is the revised site plan. We already went over this. Of course, you have your drive-through takeout restaurant here. You have your convenience store and gas bar, all located within the same one-story building with a common main entrance right here. Here you have your drive-through takeout facilities. We're proposing 25 parking spaces in total, with in addition to one barrier-free parking space. We do not anticipate that there will ever be a time where all 26 spaces are occupied. However, we did want to ensure that we did meet the zoning requirements. And then we're proposing 8 gas fueling stations on 4 separate islands. And again, in terms of the difference between the old and new site plan, our old site plan, here we have the truck fueling station, which has since been removed to satisfy some of the concerns raised by residents. In addition, I'll move forward to our landscape plan. We've also increased landscaping and added noise attenuation fencing along the perimeter of the site, abutting the existing residential uses. As you can see in green here, the proposed development does meet all of the zoning requirements of the C2 zoning. So a site-specific zoning bylaw amendment will not be required. Overall, we believe that zoning bylaw amendment application is of good planning because it will result in an increase in employment opportunities, an increase in services for local residents and workers, an increase in tax revenue dollars. It will provide for a better utilization of existing land and resources along a major roadway. It's well aligned with the county's long-term vision for the area as an emerging commercial corridor. And most importantly, it will bring the site into conformity with the official plan. That's it.
Jacob, Terence, thank you. If you could clear the screen.
Yep.
See you all. Thank you very much. Would committee like to ask questions? I'll start with Steve. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just 2 or 3 questions for Jacob. First, can you tell us a little bit about how the neighborhood meeting went? I was a little disappointed that Mark and I were not given the opportunity to attend. And but for the benefit of people watching, I'd be curious. I'm curious to know, did many people show up, and did the feedback gained in that neighborhood meeting change your plans? I wonder if you could talk about that a little bit. And then my other question is the you talk about some fencing to go around between your property and the adjacent residential houses. I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the height of that fencing and how that fits in with light pollution going from your property over to their property at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then lastly, this is more of a comment than a question, but you mentioned that you don't envision a scenario where all 25 or 26 of your parking spots are being in use. And I have a concern that you might be underestimating the success of the combination of commercial enterprises put into this property. And I'll talk more about that later when we get into our committee discussion. But I just noticed that you said you don't envision all the parking spots being used, and that is a concern of mine, that I think they might all be used with cars driving around too. But if you could just answer the first 2 questions, please.
Yeah, so with respect to the neighborhood meeting, we actually set the date with staff. So I believe they circulated the neighborhood invite, and there were 3 members of the public who were in attendance. Again, as Ryan explained, the concerns that were raised were similar to the concerns that were raised at the previous meetings, in that they didn't want to have a gas station next to their property, which is fair. But we advised them that it's much more than a gas station. It's more of a destination. We're providing for, on top of the gas station, there's going to be a drive-through takeout restaurant. And in addition, you have the convenience store. And we were sympathetic with them. I understand why you wouldn't want to have a gas station next to where you live. But given the county's vision for the area, it's in line with how the site should be developed. And just because the neighbor doesn't want the gas station next to them doesn't mean the owner shouldn't be prevented from building a gas station on the site, even though it's permitted under the official plan. With respect to your second question pertaining to the fencing and lighting, we did complete a photometrics plan, and staff in their report they just released indicated that they did not have any concerns with respect to lighting and the impacts on the abutting properties. In addition, some of the buffering from the plantings helped to mitigate some of those impacts as well. And then your last question about parking, Of course, I'm not from the area. You know your community the best, but we did exceed what the zoning requires for parking. In my opinion, this is more of a quick stop and go type a site where you quickly grab your food, you go, you grab your gas, you go. It's a run in and run out. In addition, a lot of people who will be getting food will be going through the drive-through to access the food. So you can't just think about the parking spaces, but you also have to think about the stacking spaces in the drive-through line, which will help to reduce some of those impacts. So hopefully I've answered your questions.
Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Mark first and then Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. At the last public meeting, and I brought this up with Ryan and Matt before that, I brought up a number of environmental concerns, and I know we have gas stations close to homes, but most of those have been grandfathered in before we knew better. And I don't say this, and I see Terrence there. Terrence will remember because we had it out about that. And I don't say this as somebody against gas stations. Most people don't know this, but my father owned 4 or 5 gas stations in his career. I worked at them for years and years and years. And some of them were near homes, but they were built 30, 40 years ago. And a lot has come to light about the environmental concerns near residential homes and seepage and things like that, especially when we're talking about water and soil and reclamation later. I'm wondering if maybe you could speak to that and also through the chair, and also, the reclamation process, because I also happen to think that we might be 30 years away from not really having gas stations, let alone building, a gas station in a Tim Hortons down the street from a gas station in Tim Hortons, where there's already been another approved gas station in a Tim Hortons down from, it's kind of the Brantfordization I said Brantfordization of planning, where, I think about, and you may not be aware of this, but I think about the Tim Hortons across from the PJ, that was one of the busiest in Canada for a time, and now it's definitely not that kind of busy because of the proliferation of the same sort of developments near each other, just several down the street from each other. So I'm wondering if you could speak to those concerns and anything that's been uncovered between October and now on the environmental piece and the sort of market saturation piece.
Sure, Mark. Thank you for asking those questions there. So the answers are going to be similar to what your staff have provided and what we provided before. In terms of seepage and things of that, as you're saying, gas stations of the old days were not designed well, and we didn't have the science and the technology to prevent spillage and things of that nature that we do today. Gas stations continue to be approved next to residential houses throughout Ontario, specifically GTA, obviously, as it becomes more dense. If there were concerns and issues that were proven, trust me, there would be lawsuits all over the place about that. And to my knowledge, I have not heard of one lawsuit next to a residential next to a gas station caused by contamination of the gas station, other than contamination of groundwater and soil, etc. But that was done historically, and through the Environmental Protection Act, I believe that anyone who has pollution is required to clean up that pollution, whether it spills on other people's properties or not. So there is guarantees and protections in place for that, as well as gas stations that need to be approved by the TSSA. So there are standards in place. So we've done the best to our ability to create the gas station to current standards and to protect everything. In talking about whether gas stations will be here in 30 years or not, that's a good point. I mean, no one knows for the future. That's why we have to design these things to be retrofitted, et cetera, and to be used for other uses. And that's why we have a combination of restaurant, commercial, and gas station use there. Maybe this will turn into an electrical charging use, so we'll take out the pumps and put electrical. I mean, who knows? It's fantasy world at this point, but it looks like it could be possible. And then to talk about competition, I guess. There's a gas station, whether that's ever materializes or not, whether they decide at the last minute there's a different use that should be on this site. It's not built yet, but let's assume that it is built. And there's a gas station down the street from us. The OMB years ago has decided that the town councils and the OMB as well should not be involved with who develops the best mousetrap. That's the term that was used. So maybe we're going to develop a better gas station at more affordable competitive rates, and people want to come to our gas bar. Maybe that gas station down the street will be better than ours, and we'll have to transition to a different use. Under the C2 zone, there's a number of uses that we can have on this site. So if we find out that the gas station is not competitive or it's not the best use for the site, the owner has the ability to pivot or transition out of this, as they would if gas is no longer needed in the future. So to deal with market, it allows more competition for the consumers, for the residents of the area. If you have a monopoly of gas in the area, you're not going to be tempted to lower the prices, where if you have competition, you will. And people, there's different brands in that people are like Sunoco versus Petro-Canada or whatever the case may be. So there's more opportunity. And finally, I would suggest that the same company, whether it's Esso, would not allow two Esso stations right beside each other. There's a market share that they have to do. I hope I've answered your questions.
Oh, absolutely. My only other one, Mr. Chair, and I do want to thank the presenters for the changes they have made, taking out the diesel and putting some of that. Who knows? Maybe one day we'll get a zoning amendment asked to put in charging stations. But the one thing I wanted to follow up on that Steve asked that I don't think was really answered specifically was about the light pollution piece. We're talking about fencing, et cetera, but also lights, the type of lights, the direction of the lights. We've dealt with a lot of developments of this nature in the last 3 years where, honestly, just using a better light system would save a lot of grief for everybody involved, especially when it's so close to residential homes that have enjoyed the quiet and the lack of light. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And trust me, in my development career, gas stations are the highest light producers or polluters, we'll call it. They have high intensity lights. They shine down. They want it as brighter than daytime someone right at the pumps for both video cameras and all that stuff. So we took that into great consideration when we looked at the site. We've developed this photometric drawing, which shows what the light levels are. And there is zero. We've engineered the light standards and the projection of the light to be zero trespass at the lot line. So the light will not spill past the lot line, nor will you be able to see a bulb shining through your window, because that's protected as well. So we protected against the light. And that photometric drawing will be part of the site plan approval. So therefore, if our owner, a future owner, whatever, decides to change those lights, decides to move that bulb, whatever, and it is in contradiction to what the photometrics are, they can be forced to correct that and protect the existing residents. Again, we're assuming in the future that these existing residents will no longer be there. They'll be transitioned out. But for the time being, we need to protect the interests of people who are living beside us. And that's the reason we volunteered to create the noise fence along the entire abutting property line. So that, again, although we didn't necessarily need to do it, we felt it was the most appropriate thing because the residents did raise concerns on that regard.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mark. Robert.
Thanks, John. Just through you to either of the presenters, and it's a site plan question, and it's related to the drive-through capacity of the drive-through restaurant. It seems, I don't know whether it's because of COVID or what it is, but recently as I've been traveling around, I'll give you 3 examples of where drive-through capacity is inadequate. One is a McDonald's restaurant in Aylmer, where the cars are continually lined up on the main street due to lack of capacity. The other is in the town of Norwich, the Tim Hortons store. Actually, they've had to close one of the entrances because of the continual backlog onto the street outside the restaurant. And the other one is the Tim Hortons across from the casino in Brantford, which has a continuous congestion around their drive-through. So my question is, how is the determination made on the capacity of the drive-through? Is that a municipal requirement, or is that a design feature? And you can answer that, and you can also answer, is there any risk that you see in backlog onto the very busy streets on each corner of the drive-through restaurant?
Thank you, Councillor. A good question, especially during COVID. I too am experiencing crazy lineups at Tim Hortons or McDonald's or wherever, right? I feel that it's a COVID issue right now. No one can predict that. So when you talk about how is the stacking numbers developed, it's a combination of both the municipal requirements as well as the best design scenario. We can't, if we designed a site that would be gridlocked by the drive-through, the rest of the site wouldn't function and it would hurt the business. So we have to take that in consideration. In this case, again, I think it's accentuated because of COVID right now, which we all hope would go back to normal. In the event that we find that the site itself is being congested, we have the ability to, can someone put the site plan on there? Not sure who has control. Anyways, we have the ability to take the drive-through, put it all the way around, and then go through the site as well. So it's not backing on. So you would back it up all the way to Oak Park Road theoretically. So you have the whole site to fill up as well, and that would encumber the gas station site. I mean, we have enough room to move it to one side, and we do that through painted lines on the site if we needed to. Currently, I don't believe we do need that though. So in terms of the risk onto the roads, I don't believe there's any risk onto the roads. I believe the risk is to the functionality of the business if we didn't design it correctly, or if COVID continues for the next year or two. The final point I'll make is we have to go through site plan approval process after this zoning process. And then it's very close to when the services are going to come into that area. So whether we develop early or later, I mean, this thing's not going to be developed till 2023, I'm getting my years off, or 2024 perhaps. So this is a ways off anyways, and the roads will be updated by then anyways.
Thank you. Any further questions of Jacob and Terence? John, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, a comment, if I could. I just want to circle back to the discussion on the number of parking spots. Because I too feel that you may exhaust the number of spots that were there. And Jacob, you made a statement that you guys went above the required number of spots. I just want to be totally clear here. You went above the required number of spots by one. So let's be totally transparent here. It's not like the fact you're putting in 10 extra spots. You went above the required spots by one spot, because the required spots, it suggests 21, I believe it is, with 4 barrier free. And you're putting in 25 plus 1 barrier free. So again, I appreciate the fact that you did go above and beyond, but I just want to be clear here. It's not like we've got a full parking lot in there. Thank you.
Thank you. David, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to the agent. The citizens meeting, you talked about the fence you're putting up for noise attenuation. That was a request by the residents, you said?
Councillor, through you, Mr. Chair. No, it wasn't a request by the residents. It was a concern by the residents that they're going to get noise from the cars, etc. So we thought, what best way to deal with that, to put a fence up to protect them against the noise. So again, in my true opinion is we don't need it, but in my conscious opinion, we should provide it to reduce the stresses and the concerns of the abutting neighbors. In terms of the design of that fence, that will be through site plan. We haven't come up with the heights now. We have to talk to staff. But it would be there are areas that we want to have the fence, and the entire fence will be the same type of fence all the way through and the same height. So again, we haven't come up with what those heights are through site plan process yet, but the staff are currently working on that, and we're going to be going back and forth with that.
Okay, thank you. Because in our report this evening, it mentioned 2 meters, and I just wondered how you get to 2 meters. Speaking of noise attenuation, I mean, the noise of the road is there. They've always had that, but I notice with gas stations, you sit there long enough and you get what I call the boom boom cars coming up. They got boom boom boom. So there tends to be, in my opinion, anyways, a lot of noise with associated with gas stations, and no fault of the gas stations. It's just the nature of people. So I guess the only thing I would add is the higher the better. So I'll leave it at that. But I appreciate the answer.
Thank you. If there are no further questions of Jacob and Terence, if you could stay with us, I'm going to open this meeting up to the public now. Alicia, do we have anybody on the phone, on the line that would like to speak?
We do, Mr. Chairman. The first member of the public registered to speak is Megan Rutten.
Thank you very much. Megan, can we see you? Megan, welcome. You go ahead and present.
Okay. Good evening, Mayor Bailey, county councilors, and County of Brant staff. My name is Megan Rutten, and I reside at 513 Paris Road. Firstly, I'd like to thank you for allowing me the time and space this evening to speak and address my and my partner's concerns with the application to rezone 517 Paris Road from rural residential to general commercial. I'd like to start off this evening by asking our mayor and councilors, with all due respect, do any of you currently live beside a gas station, convenience store with a drive-through restaurant? No. If you all do not, then it is my hope that you can understand, not only with your mind, but with your hearts, what I'm going to say tonight. The decision that you make will affect my future, my family's future, my neighbor's future, and all of our quality of lives. My partner and I are opposed to this rezoning application for the purpose of a gas station, convenience store with drive-through restaurant. We are not opposed to development. However, this particular proposal will bring a future we are uncertain of. I understand that this parcel of land is in the long-term plan for commercial development. However, is there not a less intrusive development that could be constructed and occupied on this land? If you are to approve this application, it scares me to my core, not only for living beside a gas station with toxic fumes, increased pollution, but there will be increased traffic on an already extremely busy road with intersections with 2 additional driveways to access the roads. Health and safety is the utmost importance and a very high concern. This has all been expressed in my letter. Our water and the potential of contamination is worrisome. As again expressed in my letter, we rely on an aquifer system from the ground on our property. If this development was to occur in the future, if we were to sell our home, not only does the value decrease, but the possibility of remediation of contaminated soil may be necessary. Who would be responsible for the costs incurred to do so? We love this community, and we love to participate in seasonal festivals, events, recreational opportunities, and the beautiful trails. We not only support the county by paying taxes, like the owners of 517 Paris Road, we also support local businesses, restaurants, and grocery stores by keeping our hard-earned money in the community. We strongly believe that our future is here. The owner of the land, to my knowledge, has never been present for a meeting. Furthermore, and to my knowledge, they do not live in the area or even the province. Is there not the opportunity to meet with this individual to have a fruitful discussion? These days, everything is virtual, so I don't see a reason not to have this available as an option. As shared on the County of Brant's website, how are we green? Question 2 to the general public is as follows. How do we improve air quality and protect drinking water? My question is, what can be built on this parcel of land to meet that question? I would also like to share that the latest notice of information mailed out to the neighboring residents just before the holiday break did not include the correct site map that is currently listed on the County of Brant's website. We all received an older version, and it has caused a lot of confusion as neighboring homes were unsure as to why there was a meeting because the information had not changed. I am concerned with the holidays and the continued pandemic that there was not enough time for people to send in written comments or requests to address the committee at the public meeting. I think it would be unfair to county residents to move forward with this application and the possibility for it to be approved on January 25th of 2022. In my opinion, a destination is Camp 31, the restaurant down the road. It's Lions Park in Paris. It's the Paris Fairgrounds, not a gas station, convenience store, and a drive-through. Thank you for your time tonight.
Thank you, Megan. Would committee like to ask any questions for clarification from Megan? Mark, go ahead.
I just want to ask if Megan's aware that if this is approved tonight, that it will come to council and members of the public can speak at the next council meeting as well. It does seem unfortunate that there's some incorrect information, and with a lot of the COVID rising tensions and holidays, this is, in my opinion, a difficult timed meeting for a controversial application. But people in your community can, if they aren't able to come today, can come and speak to and send letters before the next council meeting, is my understanding. So I just wanted to ask if you were aware of that, and if not, now, hopefully you are. Thank you.
I am now. Thank you.
Megan, thank you. Just to pick up one or two of your questions, I think you may have heard earlier that a revised traffic study was conducted, and it found that there would not be an issue. And I think we also heard this evening that there is a likelihood that we will make the junction of Oak Park Road and Paris Road in the future to be a roundabout, which will further improve the traffic there. In terms of contamination, I think I heard Terence speak about the design of the gas bar and the challenges that they would face and the hurdles that they would have to meet to ensure that contamination would not be a problem. I can't speak to loss of value or property. That I think is out with the specifics of this particular committee, but I can come back to that perhaps later. Megan, I'm going to ask you to leave us for a moment. We'll ask then if there is anybody else wishing to speak to this evening.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, there is a Cheryl Waldreck.
Cheryl, good evening.
Hi, good evening. My name is Cheryl Waldick, and I live at 644 Oak Park Road. I am once again addressing committee members on the rezoning application for 517 Paris Road. I'm asking the application to rezone this property from rural residential to general commercial with the intention to build a gas station, convenience store, and Tim Hortons drive-through be denied. My main concern, along with many of my neighbors, are the potential impacts that a gas station will have on our properties and health, mainly the protection of our water sources, as most of the surrounding properties are on well water. We are concerned with the traffic at this intersection, our property values, pollution, and the disruption to our everyday way of life. This property may be designated in the official plan as commercial, but currently is zoned rural residential and is surrounded by a large number of family homes. I have lived in my home for the past 17 years, and I hope my opinion for this development is valued. There are a number of points that I wish to address. Firstly, the notice of information for this committee meeting that was sent out to surrounding residences just before Christmas had a different site map attached than what was provided tonight. The site map was not made available for tonight's meeting until Friday, December 31st on the County of Brant website. The site map mailed out at the end of December was an older version and has caused a lot of confusion to everyone that received it, and I have spoken to. This is not the first time things like this have happened. It has happened at every committee meeting on this proposal so far. I think there should be accurate and concise information sent out more than 4 days before without having to search for clarity online, especially at the end of a major holiday, so people are given ample opportunity to address the committee in a manner that they are able to and have their opinions heard. 517 Paris Road has a well on it that has not been decommissioned, and the fuel storage tanks will be put into the ground in the same general location. Houses surrounding this property are on well water, and we share the same water table. I do not want to chance my well being contaminated by a gas station, especially when a fuel tank will now be where the well used to be. The negative environmental and health impacts of living by a gas station are well documented and very common. I have upgraded my well and septic in the past 4 years, and I don't think that I should have to connect to municipal water because gas station went in by my home and ruined my water source. The potential health issues of living by a gas station from vapors, toxins, and chemicals are well documented, and it is of great concern for the surrounding families. For example, children living near a gas station are 4 times more likely to develop leukemia, and the longer a child lives near a gas station, the risk of developing leukemia increases by about 3% per month. I have a variety of links that I can send out to people on certain health issues. The September 2021 site map had the convenience store at 210.44 square meters and Tim Hortons at 87.06 square meters, totaling 297.5 square meters, which was over the zoning bylaw total floor area requirement of 150 square meters for a convenience store. The new site map has the convenience store portion now at 150 square meters, an additional automotive service station portion at 60.44 square meters, and Tim Hortons still at 87.06 square meters, with the total 297.5 square meters. The floor space and building size hasn't changed, just the labeling on the site map has. These 3 businesses are all under one roof with one entrance and exceeds the zoning bylaw. This feels misleading in my opinion. There was mention of required road widening or a roundabout on page 8 in the Planning and Development report on the southwest side of the intersection. It referenced an attached roundabout map, but I didn't see it in the documentation. I'm requesting more details on this as it could affect the use of my property. There is concern for access of the driveways surrounding this intersection. Also in the Planning and Development report on page 5, section 3.9.2-D, it states the county should promote cycling and walkability, and although there are not any sidewalks along either road, that the proposed development use may encourage cyclists and foot traffic. This is a heavily traveled intersection that has seen increasing accidents, high speeds, has multiple driveways, and now it is suggested to extend the northbound turning lane on Paris Road, add a roundabout or widen the road, and include 2 new driveways for the gas station. It seems far-fetched to suggest the proposed development will encourage cyclists and walking in the county, and that this is listed as a reason to approve this application. There is mention about various reports and studies being done to assess the impact of noise, light, travel, traffic, etc. for this proposed development. Where are these reports? When were they performed? Was it done during one of the lockdowns in Ontario? And is that information available to view? I can tell you as someone that actually lives in the area that my neighbors and I will be negatively impacted by these issues, and to state in the report that we will not be affected is not true. Adding a few shrubs and 140 feet more of 6-foot fencing on the east side of the property will not properly address and fix these issues. An invitation for a neighborhood meeting on November 16th was mailed by the County of Brant on behalf of the applicant. It stated that the meeting was being hosted solely by the landowner and that no council decisions had been made or will be made as a result of this meeting. The removal of the diesel fueling section was not a result of consultation at this meeting. It had been stated by the applicant's representation at the October 2017 meeting that it would be removed, but it was still presented on the site map at the September 2021 meeting. It wasn't removed until after the September meeting. The additional east side fencing, landscaping, trees and bushes, and the relabeling of the floor space are the only revisions to this application that were implemented between the September 2021 meeting and the neighborhood meeting on November 16th. To say that the revisions made, as I was told in an email by planning staff, was the result of the neighborhood meeting is incorrect and should not be presented as an agreement by neighbors that we are in favor of these revisions. As I have stated at each previous committee meeting, there are 12 Tim Hortons, 12 other coffee shops, 8 grocery stores, a Walmart, 16 pharmacies, and 11 gas stations, all within 12 kilometers of this property. including a gas station announced as coming soon half a kilometer down the road in view of this property that is not adjacent to residential properties. There's also all the current residential and commercial development on Rest Acres Road. How much more gas and coffee is needed in this area? As stated at the September 2021 meeting by the applicant's representation, people will shop at the convenience store for household needs is a stretch and not a reason to approve this application. All the references in this rezoning application and then the future development permit proposal complying with the current official plan and the future designation for this area may be a good talking point, but it doesn't mean that it is appropriate for this location. Just because something is technically allowed to happen doesn't mean that it should. Currently, this property is surrounded by family homes and has been for decades. All of the homes in this area aren't suddenly going to be rezoned commercial and torn down for development. My home is 100 years old and I will not be moving anytime soon. And I can confidently say that the families living on Oak Park Road and Paris Road feel the same way as I do. The applicant's representation has continuously said throughout this process that this application fits into the future development of the area, but there is little else that they have been able to offer as to why this should be approved. There is not a need for a gas station, convenience store, and drive-through on this residential property. Just a want by an out-of-province developer that has let this property diminish greatly. The only suggestion given by the applicant's representation when asked by council members at the last meeting to address our concerns was to say we had had plenty of time and that we should have moved, and suggested that we could also rezone our properties as commercial to make more money when we sell. I would also like clarity on whether a decision on this application has been made before tonight's committee meeting or it hasn't. In the attached documentation for tonight, there is a bylaw final PDF that is dated for January 25th, 2022, and is ready to be signed for the approval of this application. I would like clarity on this, please. I appreciate once again being able to present my views about this application to the committee. I do not want to live beside a gas station. I don't want my and my neighbors' well water, health, and daily way of life to be affected by one. We are open to development, but we are very opposed to a gas station at this location and proximity to residential homes. I am asking that after your consideration of all the presented information tonight and from previous committee meetings, that this application be denied. Thank you.
Cheryl, thank you. You've obviously done some homework there. Let me just address directly. A decision has not been made. That's the whole purpose of this evening's process. At the end of this evening, a decision will be made, but it will then go to council for ratification. I would also like to apologize for the mix-up in the notice of information. I think, though, that you actually did know what was on the map, so you didn't get the right map, but I think you knew the information. I hope that other people also did that. But there's a lesson.
Other people did not.
Well,
I knew myself because I was at the neighborhood meeting, but other neighbors did not.
Then there's a lesson for us to learn there. Thank you.
Yes.
Any questions that committee would like to put to Cheryl for clarification? Seeing none, you did mention a few things along the way. You mentioned the health issues, which I think, if I understand correctly, the design standards for the development of a gas station probably, I'm assuming, will be determined by the need to be safe. And I think maybe either Jacob or Terence could speak to the design standards.
Right. So through you, Mr. Chair, there was a lot of opinion and speculation and hypothesis and all that stuff about what will or could happen. Again, are all these things possible? I mean, I'm not here to comment whether they're possible or not, but if I had to bet, I would assume nowadays with the technology, it wouldn't be possible. but we do have to meet the TSSA approval requirements for a gas station. There is Environmental Protection Act to protect landowners if contamination happens to their property as a result, which again, we wouldn't be designing a site that we would expect to create contamination, because then the owner of the property would be liable to fix that contamination. So, I mean, that would far outweigh the cost of the development itself. So logic would tell you that that wouldn't happen. In terms of the noise, the neighbors suggested that they didn't care about the noise fence and the trees and stuff like that because it didn't satisfy them. We put that in there as an olive branch or as to try to resolve things. If the neighbors don't want that, we're happy not to provide that. It's an extra cost to the developer, but we offered to put that in there. And again, if the neighbors aren't satisfied with that, we'd be happy not to provide it. And again, I think there's a disconnect between, and it's not a personal thing at all. It's what's happening with the planning system today, is that the public's not fully informed as to how the planning process works, which causes a lot of confusion in the public. The provincial government's trying always to resolve or re-examine things to try to make it easier, but it is a very complex process. And the official plan sets out the zoning that is to become in place.
I think if I could just stop you there, Terence, I think we've been through that already.
Okay.
I just wanted to keep you on focus on the health issue.
Thank you.
Perhaps I could ask our staff to comment on the changes in the sizes of the sections of the building and the relevance of that to the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. With respect to the dimensioning of the building for the uses, that actually came as a direct result of previous comments we heard about the size of the building, and we asked Terrence to give us a very clear breakdown of the space being dedicated for each proposed use within that building. And so what came back was the dimensions that are shown on the current plan. What I have here again is 150 square meters for a convenience store, 87 square meters for a restaurant, and the remaining space dedicated for the automotive service station.
Just to clarify, Ryan, does that bring us outside? Is the application then outside of the requirements for C2?
Mr. Chair, the automotive service station has the defined term of an automotive service station permits a maximum of 150 square meters for a convenience store. And so we advised the applicant that they needed to come into conformity with that proposal or otherwise bring forward a request for a site-specific provision to allow for a larger convenience store. And through their most recent submission, they clarified, and again, I've asked Terrence to confirm, but they have clarified that the maximum area to be allotted for that building would be 150 square meters for the convenience store. And that is also, again, to be confirmed in their site plan, and that would be confirmed for the issuance of any building permit. That has to be satisfied. They have to meet the zoning bylaw requirements.
Thank you, Ryan. I think that's picked up the specific questions I had from Cheryl. I'd like to move on, if I may, and ask if there are any other residents who would like to speak to this evening. Alicia?
I do not have any other residents registered to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you. I can see that Megan would like to ask another question. Go ahead, Megan.
Through the mayor, thank you. I'm sorry. The maps that are provided are quite small and they haven't had the opportunity to go online, so I do apologize. And I've heard a few times this evening, there's now going to be a service center at this location.
I'm sorry, I didn't catch that. Megan, could you say it again?
Can we get some clarification on a service center?
No, don't think I heard service center, but Ryan could comment on that.
Sure, Mr. Chair, through you, the defined term in the zoning bylaw for an automobile service station includes design for the retail sale of gasoline motor fuel. It's the technical term for a gas station. I apologize.
Okay, so not a service center to service vehicles. Thank you.
I think the answer is no on that one. If there are nobody else online, I'm going to ask it formally a second time. Is there anybody else who would like to speak to this from the public? And for conformity with our process, ask a third time, is there anybody who would like to speak from the public? Hearing and seeing none, I'll call the public part of this meeting to a close. And I'm going to pass this matter back then to committee. How would committee like to decide on this? Mayor Bailey?
Before we decide what to do with it, I just want to make it, put it on the record that I, just because we can do this and just because this is allowed to happen on this piece of property, it shouldn't happen in my eyes. I find it very, very forceful and very, it's just not the right application for this corner. And I won't be able to support this tonight at all, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you. Steve?
Well, thanks, Mr. Chair. I wanted to speak to this for a minute before we get into exactly what to do with it. Similar to the mayor, I won't be supporting this, and I wanted to explain a little bit why. Jacob and Terrence did an effective and convincing job of painting a picture of what I believe will be a very busy and successful commercial enterprise. And that's exactly what scares me about it. I do not share our staff's confidence that this will not affect traffic in that area, even with a roundabout showing up in 2026, which is based on the information presented tonight, possibly 2 years after this commercial business opens. You know, Jacob, to use some of Jacob and Terrence's own words, I envision 30 or 40 vehicles running in and running out of this particular mousetrap, which may or may not be any different than the mousetrap up the street. And I'm not against competition. I'm not against capitalism. But I do have a concern about what this would do for the traffic around that property. It gives me a lot of concern. And it also concerns me that the representatives of the applicant more than once have referenced their assumption that the houses are going to disappear. And I don't think that's a fair assumption. Yes, the official plan says that this area is designated commercial, and I understand that some commercial venture is going to be on that property at some point. I just think that this particular combination is too much for that corner. So I will not be supporting it for those reasons. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Mark, you wanted to speak?
Yeah, I'd like to speak this as well. I clearly won't be supporting it as well. In addition to, you know, the mayor's comments about sort of the forceful nature of this and the fit, and Steve's comments about traffic, my piece is still about the environment. You know, I agree with both those other points, but, you know, we talk about this is well water, and all the other examples that were discussed were serviced areas, downtown areas. The example used is downtown Toronto. Well, last I checked, no one's on well water in downtown Toronto. Right? I got more environmental discussion and more detail from the neighbors than the official planners hired by the applicant. You know, that line about somebody's well-being and their well being contaminated really sticks with me. And this might be a better fit for the future, but as Steve and the mayor both said, like these houses aren't going away in a year or 10 or 15. And so maybe in the future it would make a lot more sense, but to me it doesn't at this time. You know, I would have given Cheryl a standing ovation if I could. She spoke better on the issue than I think any of us probably could. And there's a lot of assuming in a lot of the answers, and I'm not comfortable with that. You know, I would worry about this. I do worry about this. You know, one developer at this point says, here, you know, we can understand, Jacob, I believe, said, we can understand why the neighbors wouldn't want this. And then Terrence says, well, when the neighbors say they don't want this, Terrence says, well, maybe we don't have to build a fence. So my other piece is, you know, if this does get approved, and I'm not going to support it, but if it does, I'd like to request a bump up, just because that scared the crap out of me, pardon the language, right? That idea that, you know, we're coming into this with good faith, but, you know, if the neighbors don't like it, then we don't have to do this. And yeah, that's true. And there's some aspects of this that, you know, they might fit the technical definitions, but then what's the point of having a council if we can't vote, you know, based on our own concerns and our own local experience? So again, I think, you know, if they were to propose a pharmacy here, it makes a lot of sense. If they were to propose a childcare center, wow, that would be great. If they were to propose something like what's on the corner of Willow, where the little kids' school is, and anyway, there's development right across the street that really fits the area. And then on the traffic piece too, I brought this up last time. I just want to bring it up one more time. Right now, when the antique place has a sale, the traffic is hell. What's going to happen when we have 35 cars an hour, or 50 cars an hour, or 70 cars an hour? Who knows how many. So again, in the future, yeah, the vision I get for the future, but this to me is not how you get to that future in a way that makes sense. So I can't support it either. And I know it's not on the table yet, but maybe I can make a motion to deny the application.
Well, I think I'd like to have somebody make a motion.
I'll make that motion.
There's a recommendation that we'll have to deal with first. Brian, you're making a recommendation?
I'll
Mr.
move
Chair.
the recommendation, Mr. Chair, to get it on the floor, please.
Yeah. Do I
Sorry,
have a second
Mr.
to
Chair, if I may just interject.
that? Oh, you may, no, sorry, you may not.
Okay.
Could I get a seconder to the motion? Thank you, John. Is there any further discussion? If not, I'm going to call the motion. Those in favor of the motion? Those voting against the motion?
Can the bylaw be voted on tonight as well?
Terence, you're not invited to this part of the meeting. The motion is denied. So we need to, I think, if I'm correct, Alicia, we need to have a motion that deals with it.
That is correct, Mr. Chairman. This committee will have to recommend something to council.
Okay, so Mark, go ahead, please.
Motion to deny the application.
Seconded by Mayor Bailey. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the motion. All those in favor? Motion carried. We'll carry forward that motion to our council meeting at the end of this month. Thank you to all those involved, Megan, Cheryl, Jacob, and Terence. And we'll move on to the next item on the agenda, which is 110 Maple Avenue South. And Kayla, you're going to take us through this one. Are you there, Kayla?
Good evening. I'm sorry, my computer just froze there.
Okay, welcome, Kayla. You take it away.
Can I just confirm you can see my presentation?
We certainly can. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Good evening, council and members of the public. This is a minor rezoning application for lands located at 110 Maple Ave South to prohibit a residential dwelling unit as a permitted use as a required condition of consent application B6020AW. The subject lands are located on the east side of Maple Ave South in the former township of Burford, and the lands have an approximate area of 44 hectares. The subject lands are designated agricultural in the County of Brant official plan, and they are zoned agricultural and natural heritage in our zoning bylaw. The rezoning and related severance is consistent with the provincial policy statement and conforms to the County of Brant official plan. No agencies or departments were circulated, have raised any concerns, and no public input has been received. It is my professional opinion that the request is appropriate and represents good planning, and therefore I recommend that the minor rezoning amendment application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Kayla. Does committee have any questions of Kayla? Seeing none, then I'll move on to invite the agent or the applicant or the agent of the applicant to present. Is the agent or the applicant here? Alicia, do you know if we've got anybody representing the applicant?
I do not have an applicant registered to speak for this item.
So tell me what I then do next when we don't have anybody here. Do we just proceed on?
Yes, you can just proceed to request whether or not there's any members from the public, although I don't have anyone registered for that either.
Okay, well, I'll go through that formal process. Is there anybody on the line that would like to speak from the public on this matter? I'll ask a second time in regard of 110 Maple Avenue South. I'll ask a third time, and seeing that and hearing nobody, I will call the public section of this meeting to a close and pass the matter to committee to decide. Mayor Bailey?
I move to approve.
Thank you. Seconded by John Peers. Thank you. Any further questions or debate, comments? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. This will be taken to the next council meeting at the end of the month for
Just a brief
ratification.
point of order. Just a reminder that Councillor McAlpine's internet is very slow. You may want to give him a little moment to vote.
Thank you. I will do that. Apologies, John. Okay, moving right along, we're on to item 8.3. And this is Shannon talking about 29 Fairfield Road.
Thank you. I will be presenting tonight on behalf of my colleague. Shannon.
Okay, so it's Kayla presenting.
Yes.
Go ahead, Kayla.
Thank you. Good evening, council and members of the public. This is a minor rezoning application for lands located at 29 Fairfield Road from Kaminsky Limited. And this was a required condition as a result of a surplus farm dwelling severance application B61-20. The subject lands are located on the south side of Fairfield Road and east of Fairfield Road and Maple Ave South intersection. The lands are approximately 48 hectares in size. The purpose of this application is to rezone a portion of the subject lands to prohibit a dwelling on the retained lands and to remove the agricultural site-specific provision A-23 from the severed and the retained lands. The severed parcel will be zoned as agricultural. The proposed application is consistent with the provincial policy statement and the growth plan. The subject lands are designated agriculture in the County of Brant official plan. And in my opinion, the application is in conformity with the OP, as the retained lands will continue to be farmed as part of a larger farming operation. The subject lands are currently zoned special exception agricultural A23, which permits the use of automobile repair garage and vehicle sales establishment, in addition to the uses in the agricultural zone. The retained lands will be rezoned as agricultural with the site-specific A9 to prohibit a dwelling, and the severed lands will be rezoned as agricultural, removing the site-specific provision, which is no longer required. In my opinion, the proposed rezoning is consistent with the provincial policy statement, in conformity with the growth plan, and conforms to the County of Brant official plan and zoning bylaw. I am therefore recommending approval of the rezoning application. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions that committee may have.
Kayla, thank you. If you can bring us back to the full screen. Thank you. Does committee have questions for Kayla on this matter? Seeing none, I'll then thank you, Kayla, and we'll move on to ask if the applicant or the agent of the applicant is here. I suspect not, since I think it was the same person. Recognizing they're not here, I'll open the matter up to the public. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this matter? I'll ask a second time. Is there anybody from the public would like to speak to this matter on 29 Fairfield Road? I'll ask a third time, and hearing and seeing nobody, I'll close the public part of this meeting and pass the matter back to committee to decide. Would somebody like to make a motion? Thank you, Brian. Seconded by Joan. Thank you. Any further discussion, commentary? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? Motion carried. Thank you. Moving on to 8.4, this is the site plan control application for 1067 Rest Acres Road. And Dan, welcome. You're the man. You're on now.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just confirming you can see my presentation.
I can, thank you.
Excellent. So this is a site plan control application presentation. As purpose of this application is to present the site plan control application, the overall design, site design. And as you would remember, this would come at the direction of the Policy and Strategic Initiatives Committee back in November, which requested the bump up of multiple blocks within the Rest Acres corridor. And specifically, we're dealing with block 33, which is part of the Riverview Highlands, or simply Grand 2 subdivision by Lasani. And I've got the block 33 highlighted there with a star on your screen, just to give you an idea of where it falls within the context of the overall corridor of Rest Acres. So the subject lands themselves, identified in red, has got a long kind of rectangular shape. We have future residential and existing residential to the north. We have to the west, we have the commercial plaza, which is currently under construction, as well as existing residential, future residential to the south, as well as some parklands that have recently been completed, as well as natural heritage and future residential to the east. So the subject lands are currently designated as an urban residential land use in our official plan. And again, just comparing surrounding land uses, close proximity to the shopping center, commercial lands, as well as the surrounding residential land uses. And the intent of this urban residential land use is to permit a variety of housing types supporting neighborhood commercial uses in low, medium, or high density form of development. The current zoning on the property is a site-specific zoning in the RM2-31 zone. This zone permits fourplexes, row houses, stacked towns, street fronting townhouses. The site-specific provisions relate to lot area, frontage, side yard setbacks, rear yard setbacks, lot coverage, and building height. The site-specific zoning also includes provisions directing the development and how we deal with setbacks. So the entire subject lands and development of those subject lands would be dealt with as one entire unit. So setbacks would be from the property line rather than individual units themselves. And just to identify the parking requirements, which are following our zoning standards, 2 spaces per unit plus visitor parking, plus the required barrier-free parking spaces. So I'll quickly run through the proposal. I know that our applicants are with us who have a much more flashy presentation for you, but what is shown on the screen here are some sample elevations of the units. This is a 102 row house dwellings consisting of 2 and 3 stories, a mix of 2 and 3 stories on a private road, and the private road is identified in gray. And again, I've kind of twisted the site plan. We do have to the north, or above the site is the commercial plaza with the existing Tim Hortons, just to give you a point of reference. The proposal does identify a number of locations for open space or amenity areas, this consisting of landscaping, benches, bike racks, and community mailboxes. And I've tried to provide you a little bit of a blow up of each of those areas. So consisting of again, connections and areas that can be utilized within the condo or Planet condominium itself. This slide identifies the existing and proposed pedestrian connections within the site and external to the site. So you can see that there are a number of connections through and interior to the site, directly out to the public roads. Again, providing what I would consider to be safe and efficient and predictable and convenient pedestrian connections to, again, encourage residents to utilize them. In terms of parking, visitor parking itself is identified in blue Again, these visitor parking spaces are scattered throughout the site, again, to encourage their use and encourage kind of balance them throughout the site to allow for ease of access for any visitors. I've also provided the parking breakdown. So the site is providing the minimum requirement for parking. And this is the calculation is determined by the private spaces. So again, 2 spaces per unit. Visitor parking spaces, which is 0.35 spaces per unit, a total of 36 spaces, and barrier-free spaces, which is based on the calculation shown in the chart, which totals 7 spaces. So again, the site is providing the minimum number of spaces proposed or required. And just some additional notes, the site plan is within the 4th submission, kind of finalizing technical review, engineering standards, any technical studies. We also have received plan of condominium and part law control applications to facilitate the ownership of each unit. So based on the technical review by various departments and the application of applicable planning policy, it's my professional opinion that the design provides for compatible land use representing appropriate application of the general community and urban design policies. The land use conforms to the policies of the growth plan in Greater Golden Horseshoe and is consistent with policies of provincial policy statement. The application conforms to the County of Brant official plan and complies with the provisions of the zoning bylaw. So therefore, in order to allow the site plan control application to be finalized, I am recommending to the committee that this application be approved. Thank you.
Dan, thank you. That was very comprehensive. And just to remind us all, this was a request by us to bump up this site plan control application. It's my first run through this. I think some of the other new councillors are going through it for the first time as well. So are there any questions that committee has for Dan? I'll start with John Pierce and then Steve.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. Question on page 174 of our package there, when it talks about the site-specific provisions, there's 2 bullet points in there, and one says lot coverage maximum 60%, and one says lot coverage for a dwelling maximum 55%. So do I take it from that somewhere on these properties there will be allowed some sort of shed, or what accounts for that extra 5%?
So in this case, we're dealing with, again, the development of the site as a whole, as a complete unit. So the total number of buildings, or the total area dedicated to building footprints. This also includes patio areas. So for each unit, the additional coverage for each unit could also include patio areas. The inclusion of any accessory structures, we would be looking at the ability or inability to meet the required setback for those accessory structures.
Right.
It is something that we are considering and need further discussion as part of the planned condominium and the agreements, so that the owners understand whether or not, what needs to be considered if they were to locate a structure, and where is it appropriate to locate accessory structures.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. One more, if I could, Mr. Chair, on page 175. When it talks zoning residential multiple second density, under section I, when it talks about interior parking space dimensions, the required is 3 meters by 6 meters, provided there's 2 different numbers there. There's a 3.2 meter by 6, and there's a 3.07 meter by 612. Now, does that just account for the I'll call them 3-story as opposed to 2-story units? The garages are a different size?
I believe the interior parking space dimensions are reflective of the need to accommodate stairs. So if there was the standard size is 3 by 6, however, there is a permitted encroachment for stairs within the garage. And that's what that additional dimension considers.
Okay, So my apologies here, Mr. Chair. So of the two that's saying provided, so the provided when stairs are required, it will be 3.2 by 6. Is that a correct statement? I just want to make sure that we don't fall into a situation again where all of a sudden we need stairs in a garage, and once we put the stairs in, we can't fit a car in.
I'm going to suggest, John, that we leave that to Dave Aston when he comes on at the end of this particular section.
Thank you, Mr.
Chair. Steve, you had a question.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Chair. Real quick to Dan. We talk about this all the time, but we'll hit it one more time. The parking spaces. So there's 2 per unit. Are we to assume that, are we to understand that one of those parking spaces is in the garage, which we all know gets filled with junk?
Through you, Mr. Chair, you are correct. One space is proposed within the garage, providing again that minimum parking space size, and then the second space would be within the driveway.
Okay, thank you. Becomes a hot topic over and over again. It would be refreshing to see, there's nothing against Dave in this application, but it's the one we're talking about. It would be refreshing if we sometimes saw site plans that showed more than the minimum of extra visitor parking spaces, knowing that people's garages get filled up, and we're the ones that get the calls when the cars are on the streets. So I think this is more something for us to maybe discuss within our official plan or within our own zoning bylaws. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions for Dan from committee? Seeing none, I have one, Dan, if I may, and it really follows on to what Councillor Howes just mentioned. We have a 6-meter wide internal road, and we need to maintain that 6-meter wide internal road free of traffic for fire purposes. So that really emphasizes or reinforces the challenges of parking. Do we have any internal process by which we will see that policed? Because I suspect, having seen the development to the immediate south, which is similar in nature, there are cars parked on the street, and we do have to then deal with that.
Yes, exactly. Through Mr. Chair, it's a narrow roadway. The applicants are aware of the limitations that the residents will face. I think that it comes eliminating the potential for residents parking within the roadway itself out front of whatever unit they're visiting is directly reflective of the importance of laying out the visitor parking in scattering it throughout the site as shown, to encourage those visitors to use those spaces rather than park within the roadway. And there will be adequate signage notifying residents of no parking, fire route, and that would be up to the condo board to enforce as well.
Okay, thank you, Dan. Just before we move on to Dave, I just want to say I thought the presentation that you prepared there, this site plan control, if that's typical of what happens each and every time, I'm very impressed. I think it gives great detail. It gives it a lot of confidence. Moving on then to the agent or the applicant of the agent. I guess, Dave, you're the applicant of the agent this evening.
Yes, good evening.
And over to you. You have a presentation, I think.
I'm trying to find my presentation. Oh, I know. Please bear with me for 1 second. I know what I did here. Okay. Mr. Chair, can you see that?
We can indeed, yeah.
Okay, great. Thank you. And I wanted to echo your comment that you just made with regard to the presentation that Dan had prepared. I agree. I think it was very thorough, and we have been coordinating with Dan. So our presentation, what we wanted to do is to pick up on some of the details of the building design and build on the comments related to the streetscape and landscaping. So I don't really intend to cover off all of the work that Dan had done on the official plan and the zoning, because I think he did a great job covering that. Also want to just suggest to you that this being a fourth submission means obviously we've gone through multiple submissions, and we've been working hard with staff, not just in planning, but fire, waste management, engineering, and such, to get to a point where we have this plan before you this evening, which I would say is very unique. It's, you know, in my 20 years of planning, very rarely do site plans come to council for approval. But you know, here we are this evening, and I think between the work that Dan and county staff have done and the work that we've done, you know, looking forward to having this be approved and considered at council, so Lozani can move forward with the final site plan agreement and starting to get building permits going for these lands. So Dan covered the location. Really, this, you know, on Rest Acres Road, it's changing daily, so any picture doesn't capture, but it's a developing area. Even the lands themselves, the streets are under construction, and so this area is continuing to develop really as planned by the official plan from a land use perspective. I just want to give you a sense of where we've been and where, you know, guess where council's been since 2014. And I remember working on this, and I remember Councillor Bell, you asking questions about this, changing the zoning and the official plan amendment for the land. So we've come a long way from that time, working through the subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment applications to really set the lands up for the development that's before you this evening. I do want to note that in September 2019, when the draft plan was modified and the zoning bylaw was considered, the lands were identified for the multiple residential use and zoned, and we worked through a process whereby we looked at all of the units kind of on Rest Acres Road relative to the total unit count, and determined, you know, as we worked through that this block would be permitted 103 residential units. What's being proposed is 102 residential units. So all that to say that a lot of work has been done in the background, again, to get to the point tonight where we have you know, that next detailed level of site plan approval, which really implements the official plan and the zoning that's been considered over time. This is the detailed site plan. I guess maybe here I'll just answer the question on the internal parking space. And it is a function of the different unit types. You can see the 3-story has more of a longer, narrower garage. The 2-story has a bit of a wider garage. So there's 2 different dimensions. We wanted just on the site plan to make sure we reflected that the interior dimensions were implementing the zoning bylaw, so that we don't have to come back with a minor variance in the future to deal with internal garage space. So this, again, site plan, just trying to show the green space, the building areas. What I would mention is that the site plan as it's proposed it provides the, you know, above the landscape requirement, is below the building coverage requirement. You know, I'll acknowledge we meet right on the parking requirement. And the plan here, there's been different iterations of this plan. And as Dan presented, changes over time have given consideration to allocating visitor parking across the site, not just in one location. We worked through that, what I'll call landscape space, with a pedestrian connection mid-block to Rest Acres Road with a bit of a seating area. The other thing that isn't really picked up on the plans, and it's something that Dan didn't mention, is we've looked at kind of the streetscape with Rest Acres. There'll be decorative fencing, black wrought iron fencing along the streetscape, and then landscaping. And then in areas where we could between the blocks, we've added planting and also looked at adding rain gardens in those areas, because those areas are also areas where there's catch basins. So we've added a kind of that feature, LID feature with rain gardens across that Rest Acres Road frontage. Here are some conceptual renderings. They're identified as illustrative purposes only, just based on the colors. But generally, this is the front facade of the 3-story unit. This would be the rear facade facing Rest Acres Road. So you could see there's kind of an upper balcony and then a lower patio. And this, I think, helps explain the lot coverage that Dan was speaking to, and what we've done over time in discussions with staff is you'll see at the bottom level is provided a bit of a screen. So this could be the area where people would have their barbecues or their lawn chairs and such, and provide that screened a bit from Rest Acres Road, and also assist with some screening from the residents from Rest Acres Road. This is the 2-story building. So these are all primarily internal to the site. And then this just gives an example of a side elevation of the 2-story building. As we work through the process for site plan approval, there's been a number of detailed studies, comments received, revisions made. This just provides a list of the work that goes into all of these plans. When approved, become part of the site plan agreement. So any change associated with the site plan agreement or the site plan would trigger an amendment. And then these plans also inform the letter of credit and cost estimate associated with the posting of a letter of credit for securities associated with the development. So again, just in conclusion, we support the staff recommendation this evening. There's been a lot of hard work from both sides here to put the site plan together as a complete package. And we look forward to discussion this evening and look forward to an approval this evening so that Lozani can move on with this block. And we've been working with staff just as far as an update on block 32 that's in this development, and block 97. And Councillor Howe's county staff gave us the heads up with regard to additional visitor parking, and we have been looking at future site plans to see where there's opportunities to increase visitor parking above the requirement. So it is something that staff have shared with us and something that we are looking at as well. And that's my presentation this evening.
Dave, thank you very much. Clear as ever. Questions for Dave? Start with Steve and then John.
Thanks, Mr. Chair, and thanks, Dave, for listening on that request. One of my question now is, we take every opportunity to send a message beyond the parking issue, to send a message to developers through their agents, and that our community needs more modest housing options. I'm not going to use the word affordable because it has a definition, maybe attainable. And admittedly, this is a unfair question to you, but I'm going to ask it anyway. Do you happen to know what the price points are, or ballpark on these units? Because initially, when I was reading this on paper, I was looking to support it, thinking this helps deliver some new housing products to suit the demands of our community, people who are wanting to start out or downsize, or alternatives to the 3,000 square foot house with the marble backsplash that's $900,000, $1 million. But I'm looking at the images, the product that you're you've shown the renderings of that. They're very nice looking buildings, and I'm just I'm a little fearful of where the price points end up.
Through Mr. Chair, Councillor House, I really, I don't know the price points. We could find out for the council meeting and share with council what those are in advance, or at least get them to staff so they're aware. But the price points in comparison to the single detached homes that are going to be on Dugard, they're going to be much more attainable. What I would say is, in this block, we're also working on what we're calling Block 34, which is considered for an apartment block. And again, that will be an opportunity to provide another housing choice, another opportunity. And I think that's the key. And I think even yourself and other councillors, it's critical that we provide the choice and the opportunity. And that's kind of what helps with the attainability. So there will be kind of that future Block 34 in this plan. And again, as we've if we move down the road into the Mile Hill subdivision, there's 2 other blocks there that we're looking at providing some, other unit type as well. So I'll get to Dan the price point, and maybe he can pass that along. I honestly don't know it.
Sure, that's fair. Thank you, Dave.
John, then Mark.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you. So I just want to be clear here, Dave. With the 2, I know you said the 2-story as opposed to the 3-story. The 2-story has a little bit of a wider garage on it. So I just want to confirm, that being said, that the interior parking dimensions for the 2-story is the 3.2 meter by 6 meter.
That I would. I can confirm if I got into the details of this thing.
Okay. Again, like I said, I'm just going to circle back. The reason I'm asking is I don't want us to get into a situation where what happened before, in the sense that we've got no room to put a car in the garage. I want to make 100% clear that we cannot have that again.
Councillor Pierce, I had it backwards. If I could share my screen for one more second, I think I'll zoom right in and show you where these dimensions are. Can everyone see that?
Yep.
So do you see the dimension on the 3-story dual fronting the garage, 3.2 by 6?
Okay, yep.
And then the 2-story, it's 3.07 by 6.2. So those are the dimensions we're looking at as far as the garage dimensions. And then there are stair space encroachment provisions, as Dan had mentioned, but those are the dimensions we're working with to ensure that we're not back looking for a variance as we did up the street. What happened up the street, I'd say, is a bit unique as far as how the finished floor elevations ended up relative to where they originally were designed.
Yeah, and that's what's done is done. I just want to make sure we don't go down that same path again. So as long as we've accommodated for that, I'm perfectly good with it. So one other question, if I could. So in your presentation, when it shows the conceptual drawings, and what I'm looking at is the conceptual drawing of the rear elevation of the 3-story, and the rear elevation of the 3-story is actually facing out to Rest Acres Road, correct?
Yes.
So what I'm trying to understand is, if I'm looking at that from Rest Acres Road, so I'm looking at if I'll call it a main floor patio door there. What I'm trying to understand is, if you go back up one slide and you look at that 3-story from the front, from the garage area, at what level is that patio door? Is that at the same level as the garage, or would it be at the same level as when you go up the stairs there to the front entrance? Because I know there's a bit of a drop there, but I'm just trying to understand the difference in height from the front to the back. So is that at garage level, or is that at the top of the step level?
To you, Mr. Chair, the patio ground level would be roughly at the garage level. The 2nd-story balcony would be at kind of the 2nd level coming up.
Okay. So, I'm just trying to picture that in my head. So if I'm coming off of Rest Acres Road and I walk into that patio door, at that same level is where I would walk into the garage area through a door or whatever, right?
Yeah, there'd be some living space behind it, and then
Right.
you would walk into the garage.
Okay, okay. All right, thank you very much, Dave.
Mark.
I just want to say thank you, and give credit where it's due. I know I personally had a lot of tough questions for you and Lysani over many years, but things I like seeing things we've had conversations about, like the different pedestrian walkways that meet our, exceed our walkability standards, and a developer putting in bike racks instead of the municipality, and the water gardens, and the discussions evolving on parking, et cetera, and visitor parking. It's really helpful to see, and it's just, I think, an evolution over time of getting to a better fit of what the community needs and wants, and the choice piece. I'm looking forward to the next few you have coming up in different style of housing product that I think will help us meet some of our attainability pieces. It's not going to be a golden bullet, but it is going to be helpful to see, as opposed to the estate lots over estate lots over estate lots. I've lived in neighborhoods that haven't had that walkability feature, and I've lived in some that have, and it really does work. And it's amazing to see, especially if families move in, having options to not even have to cross a street to stay on a sidewalk, but yet cover a lot of ground. It's really value add. So much appreciated.
Thank you, Mark. Any other questions for Dave? I have one, Dave, and I think you could answer it very quickly. Garbage. It looks like you've solved the problem of how to get a county garbage truck into the development and out again. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Chair, that is exactly correct. In fact, it's something we're working on all of our designs. I don't know. I can't see Dan. He might have been smiling. We went through a number of iterations and truck turning movements, and just to ensure that we are addressing waste management comments as far as movement of those vehicles through the site. So, yes.
Good. Thank you, Dave. I'll move then into the public section of this item. Alicia, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak to this item?
Mr. Chairman, I do not have any members of the public registered to speak.
Okay, thank you very much. I will ask a second time though. Sorry, I'm seeing a hand up here from somebody by the name of Bruce.
Thank you, Chair Bell. I am from the public. I am actually here for another issue, but have been listening patiently for the last 2.5 hours. And with regards to this application, as a former resident of Paris and also familiar with EMS services, I share your concern and Councillor Howe's concern about the narrow roadway between the 2-story and the 3-story homes, and the concern that garages will be filled with stuff and people will need to be parking cars. With the design of that property, you've got an entrance at the north and the south end. And if there were an emergency in the center of that section, EMS vehicles would enter from either end and then block the road. If there was a need for people to enter or exit, how would that happen in an emergency situation? So that's all I wanted to reflect on, was that I share your concern about the narrowness of that roadway and the fact that it would easily be blocked by EMS vehicles and police, and the residents would not be able to get out of there if there was an emergency need. So that's all I wanted to express. I appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Bruce. I'm sure we'll see you a little later on something else. I'll ask a third time. Is there anybody that would like to speak to this item from the public? Seeing none, then I'll pass the matter back to committee and ask how they would like to decide with this. Would somebody like to make a motion?
Motion to approve.
Yep. Seconded by David Miller. Thank you. Any further commentary or questioning? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favour? John puts his hand up. Motion carried. Thank you. Right, we'll move on. We're on to item.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Dave. Sorry, lost you. Dave, you know the drill. It'll come back to council in the end of this month.
Yes, thank you very much. I don't intend to speak based on tonight, just so everyone knows. I'll coordinate with Dan.
Well, we're all going to miss you, Dave.
Yeah, thank you. Have a good evening.
Okay, thank you, Dave. Moving on to item 8.5, which is 29 13th Concession Road. And Dan, you're going to take us through this. Maybe you can just blow your screen up a little.
Sure. Let's see.
Yeah, that's it. Perfect.
How's that?
Great. Thank you, Dan.
Now I can't see my notes, but that's okay. So this one you've seen before. This is being presented for recommendation. There are two separate recommendations included with this presentation, and as I outlined in the staff report, this is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 29th concession out in Scotland. The property location, again in the northwest area of Scotland. The total frontage of the properties is approximately 1,100 meters. That has a total area of 65 hectares, identified in red on the left side of your screen. On the right side of your screen, I've drawn a white dashed line, which identifies the current limits of the Scotland settlement area. So a portion of this site is located within and a portion is located without or outside. The portion located within the settlement boundary has an area of approximately 36 hectares. The current official plan designates the subject lands or a portion of the subject lands as suburban residential, and which is that tan color, and the off-white color is the agricultural designation. And again, the separation between the colors reflects the boundary of Scotland. The zoning, the subject lands are entirely zoned as agricultural. The surrounding land uses have zoning of agricultural to the north, suburban residential to the east, and agricultural to the west, and agricultural directly to the south, and southeast is suburban residential. So again, I'm going to break up the recommendation into two parts. The first part is dealing with the change of zoning on a portion of the subject lands having an area of 2.4 hectares from agricultural to suburban residential in order to facilitate additional residential development fronting 13th concession within the secondary settlement area of Scotland. So this is dealing with this, what's identified as current 5-lot severance proposal. This is the 2.4 hectare area that is being considered for recommendation number 1. And recommendation number 2 is considering the area identified in pink. And this is proposing to change the zoning on the remaining portion of the subject lands that are located within the settlement area, having an area of approximately 33.6 hectares from agricultural to suburban residential, and the applicants are requesting the application of a holding provision for future development of these lands identified in pink. So in terms of an overall policy review, the provincial policy statement identifies that development shall occur within settlement areas. Development shall occur on municipal services, which is preferred, this being water, sanitary, and storm. And there is consideration for minor rounding out of existing development. The growth plan, as we've identified earlier this evening, using the term complete communities. So developing or encouraging new development to encourage the establishment and complement of complete communities. And the current County of Brant official plan identifies the phasing of development, again with services, and the application of holding provisions where appropriate. So back to recommendation number 1. This is the dealing with the area in blue, the five lot severance, the 2.4 hectare portion. This application is required in order to permit additional residential uses on the subject lands. The application will facilitate a minor rounding out on private services within the secondary settlement area of Scotland, and subsequent consent applications will be required to facilitate the creation of these lots along 13th concession. And planning staff are recommending approval of the rezoning of this 2.4 hectare parcel from agricultural to suburban residential. Part 2, dealing with the larger pink area, the 33.6 hectare area, which is proposing to rezone the lands from agricultural to suburban residential with application of the holding provision to consider future development. This application of the holding provision is considered premature at this time, as there's been no consideration to plan for services within the secondary settlement area of Scotland. The lack of services results in the inability to support the achievement of complete communities through compact, connected, and offer a range of housing types. It should be noted that the suburban residential zone only permits single detached dwellings. So the changing the zoning and even applying the holding at this point doesn't give the opportunity to, it saves the opportunity for future development, but it would only permit single detached dwelling, and there's an opportunity here to consider providing other housing opportunities with the level of servicing that is available. So with that being said, again, two recommendations as outlined in your report, one recommending approval and one recommending refusal. And I'm happy to answer any questions. And I know the applicants are here to speak on their behalf as well.
Dan, thank you very much. Questions to Dan from committee? Seeing, oh, yeah, Councillor Chambers.
Dan, I'm going to be making a reference to the Hunter subdivision as the meeting goes on. I'm just wondering if you're aware of what I call the subdivision, and if you can point it out on the diagram that you provided.
Through Mr. Chair, the Hunter subdivision, would that have been, I'm going to assume that's the established subdivision that was to the southeast of the site?
Yeah, I guess I've been around a little bit longer than you have. If you can just outline that for the other committee members on one of your diagrams. It is the subdivision that is actually, it's been phased, and there are actually, it's being built out as we speak, and perhaps you can identify that area. Yes, that's the area where your cursor is, if people can see that. And if you can just point out where the park is and where the new community center is, and that will help me so I won't have to go back to that diagram when I make comments on the proposal. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, Dan. Anything else at this moment from committee? Seeing none, then I'll move on to the applicant, who I think is with us, and the agent of the applicant. So I don't know who's going to speak. Is it Rashika, or is it Bob, or is it somebody else?
Good evening,
It's
everyone.
Rashika. Okay, thank you.
It's Ruchika. I believe we have Courtney Boyd as well. Sorry, I've lost my voice. We have Courtney Boyd as well, who may be speaking at the start of the presentation, and then I will take on. Courtney, are you around?
Yes, thank you, Rashika. Good evening. I hope you're all keeping healthy and warm. So I just want to start off because Rashika is really going to dive into the planning side of things, but I wanted to give an overview of the property. I know you know a lot about the property. It's come to council before, but as Dan mentioned, the property is within the secondary settlement boundary of Scotland. And the current subject lands, well, the portion that we're specifically referring to this evening, are designated as residential. And they have been designated as residential since the county's first official plan in the year 2000. So when we bring the zoning in line with the official plan, that's kind of what the goal is this evening. Now, in discussion with the applicant, Michael Haley, the agricultural land, and I understand that the county, they want to preserve agricultural land. This agricultural land does not provide high yields. Currently, there's ginseng on the property. As you know, there will not be able to have a second crop of ginseng. So, and the other thing to consider is that the applicant's not looking to develop this land immediately. This is not an overnight project. There's time to discuss with planning staff, with the county, the development, what is needed for infrastructure. Dan mentioned that it's premature, and our view is that it's not premature, but this is the first step. The first step is to get it rezoned, and the holding provision acts as some type of protection in the sense that all the steps will be followed. These requirements must be made out for the development. Right now, we're just looking at the rezoning stage. And as you saw in Dan's diagram, very clear map, these lands are right at the corner of the settlement boundary. They're not far from the, I think Councillor Chambers referred to it as the Hunter subdivision. And it's in line with what's happening right now in Scotland in that area. It's consistent. So, and you're going to hear from Rashika that this application is good planning. It conforms with the policies of the growth plan. It's consistent with the provincial policy statement. It conforms with the official plan, and it's in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw. Rashika is going to go more in depth with that, but I do want to say as well is that the settlement area of Scotland does not have municipal services. And Dan does mention this in his report as well. So when we talk about the services for the lands, it should be known that as of right now, it is private. It's private well, private septic, and it's in keeping with what's in the surrounding area as well. Now, the applicant has heard the concerns of planning staff regarding the need for infrastructure, and this includes roads, parks, etc. And with that in mind, the application has been amended to propose a holding provision on the 33.6 hectares that are not the 5 lots being proposed to the top right. So the holding provision, as you know, will not get lifted until the approvals have been made and there's agreements with the county. So there is that level of protection at a later stage as well. And Dan in his report also mentioned that, holding provisions generally may be applied to an amending bylaw to delay development until local municipal services such as roads and sewers are in place, or as a tool to achieve an orderly staging of development to ensure adequate infrastructure and community services. And that's the aim of the holding provision. And Rashika will go into further detail from a planning aspect of that. And I wouldn't want to discount that the applicant doesn't understand or isn't enlightened to what requirements will go into development. This is only just a first step. And rather than premature, I would like to call it preliminary to all the other steps to come. And this is not a final of what's to come. This is not a site plan process. It's just a rezoning of the property.
Courtney, sorry, I should have asked this at the beginning. Could you just introduce yourself? Because I'm
apologize.
sorry, I don't know your role in this story?
I apologize. My name is Courtney Boyd. I am a lawyer with Watchers Hold and Amy Hitchon in Brantford.
Thank you.
Okay. I believe that'll be all for my comments. Obviously, the applicant is seeking that the application be approved, and I'll turn it to Rashika, subject to any questions for the planning side of the application.
Thanks, Courtney. I think I'll go over briefly on my presentation. Good evening, everybody, and I apologize. I've got some cold since yesterday, so I hope that I can continue with the presentation today. Can we move on to the next slide, Alicia, please? Thank you. I won't repeat most of the things that Dan has outlined about the location of the property, but I would like to highlight that the property is adjoining the existing subdivisions to the southeast of Scotland. Even though the property is currently being farmed, so are the previous 5 lots which were approved in 2020, and the 5 lots that have been recommended for approval. The entire area is currently being farmed. A portion, can we move on to the next slide, please? Thank you. The zoning on the property is outlined as agricultural, and as part of the secondary urban settlement boundary of Scotland, we're seeking that the designated portion of the property be rezoned to be in line with the official plan policies. Next slide, please. Thank you. So in line with that, our original application was for the 5 lots, which are highlighted in kind of a tan color, and then we revised our application to include the pink portion, which is currently designated as suburban residential within the settlement boundary of Scotland. This is a very high conceptual plan that was put together in the 2019-2020 applications, have been carried forward into this one as well. And there has not been a pre-consultation meeting to discuss the details of the conceptual plan for the balance of the lands. Next slide, please. I'll go in a little bit detail on the proposal for the 5 lots. That was our original application. So to the immediate east of this are the 5 lots that were approved by council in 2020. These lots will be serviced by private well and private septic system. They are around 3,000 square meters in size with 30-meter frontage. That's the zoning requirement for SR zone on private services, and again are in line with the provincial and the official plan policies. Next slide, please. The second portion, which is the area that is shown in pink, we're seeking approval of that piece of property, which is currently designated and is part of the settlement boundary. As I had mentioned, that it is, we're looking for a holding provision, as Courtney outlined, so that the plan of subdivision and technical analysis that needs to be completed for the development of these lands can be completed before anything any development happens on this property. Next slide, please. I would like to outline the provincial policy statement and go into a little bit depth of the policy framework here. Dan's report does outline that it is part of the settlement area, but we also need to note that settlement area not only includes the fully serviced urban areas, but also include rural settlement areas, which are without any municipal services. So similarly, even though it is considered a secondary urban settlement boundary, it is technically a rural settlement area under PPS. And the new development, it is adjacent to the existing, if you want to say, built up area. And it is not further away that it won't be connecting to the existing road network or the facilities like parks, community centers, and other amenities that are present in Scotland. The development will be compatible with the rural character of the surrounding areas. It represents, will provide for additional housing options within the Scotland. And one thing I would like to note that in PPS, where municipal services are not available or are not planned, private well and septic systems can be supported for development of large subdivisions, provided technical analysis is completed. And as I mentioned in my presentation further, we will complete the technical analysis before the plan of subdivisions will come in front of council. Next slide, please. In terms of growth plan, we've heard complete communities throughout various presentations. And complete communities isn't just for, again, fully serviced, even though they provide for mixed use neighborhoods and utilizing of existing services and sectors, but it also provides for range of housing and other options that are available in rural areas as well. With the design of the subdivision, the complete communities can be achieved with housing options, with pedestrian connectivity, with location to whether there's a requirement for a new park or connectivity to the existing park and facilities. The lands are within walking distance to all these amenities. And also in growth plan, specifically the policy 2.2.9.6, which I've highlighted on the screen here, it does talk about if the lands were designated prior to 2006, it allows for new multiple lots or subdivisions in rural areas where the services aren't present. And that's the case for the property. It has been designated since amalgamation since 1999, and the first official plan came in effect in 2000, and it has been designated for residential uses since 2000. Next slide, please.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman, we are approaching the 10-minute mark. I don't know if you wanted to ask the applicant to conclude their presentation.
Thank you. Thank you for bringing that. How much more have you got to do, Rashika?
Just 2 more slides.
Okay, carry on, please.
Thank you. I'll be quick. In this slide, we have outlined the number of technical studies that will be required before the holding provision is removed. And the holding provision, as Courtney outlined, is the step one to secure the zoning on this property before we can continue working on various other steps for the development of these lands. And we do understand that, you know, these lands are privately serviced. There's no plans for servicing, but through the technical analysis, all those aspects will be covered. I would also like to note that we are working on a pre-consultation package to discuss the aspects of these technical analysis and in any other additional requirements that county staff will have with respect to the development of these lands. And in coming weeks, we will be reaching out to county staff with for a pre-consultation on the balance of those lands. Next slide, please. I think just continuing on the complete community vision, we will be looking at provision of sidewalks, parks and open spaces, and it will provide housing options for the rural area. Both provincial policies, PPS and growth plan allows for multi-lot developments in settlement areas, which include rural settlements as well. And complete communities, as I mentioned earlier, will be addressed through the subdivision design as well as the technical analysis that I've outlined in my presentation. Any road upgrades, any sidewalks, or any other upgrades that are requested will be included as part of the subdivision process, and it will be the responsibility of the developer. So we are requesting that both recommendations, for the 5 lots, and second, for the holding provision for the future residential phase, be considered for approval by this committee. And that concludes my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ashika. If we can go back to the full screen. Thank you. Committee, questions for Ashika or Courtney? No questions? Joan, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Rashika. You mentioned that this was designated in 2000, and the one slide you showed said that this type of development is allowed as long as it was designated prior to 2006. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair. What I mentioned was the growth plan policy that allows for multiple lot developments if the lands were designated prior to June 16, 2006. So these lands were designated for residential prior to that date that is mentioned in the growth plan policies.
And it doesn't state, it says for lots, it doesn't state how many lots.
It, through you again, Chair, it talks about multiple lot residential developments on rural lands. And that's why I needed to focus on highlight that particular policy, because it's not within the fully serviced areas.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Rashika or Courtney? Seeing none, thank you both for your presentation. Now, if you just stay with us, I'll now open up this item to the public. Alicia, do we have any members of the public that wish to speak?
We do. I have a Diane DeMeester and Patrick Jutras.
Speaking together or individually?
Yeah.
How about together, Mr. Chair?
Together sounds just fine. Thank you. Welcome.
Thank you for having us, Mr. Mayor, Mr. Chabel, councilors. First of all, Happy New Year to all of you, and thank you for hosting this. We submitted a series of questions earlier this week to Dan, who was very gracious in getting us answers. We've had prior conversations with him as well. He's been incredibly helpful at letting us regular folks understand the process of planning. So I need to thank him and commend him for that. We've also had conversations with Councilman Miller about this. Our concern really is all about the water behind the development. And quite frankly, it's I'm not going to say the aggressive nature, but the documentation that's been provided to us clearly shows proposed development with lots already, severed off, roads going through even other parts of land that are not owned by the current applicant. So it's been a little difficult for us to keep an open mind to the development. Lastly, the only other comment I'd like to say before one question I have is the yield of land, I don't think should be part of a consideration of whether land should be rezoned or not. That's just my opinion. The it was shown a little earlier, the different studies that would have to be done while in holding. My question to you all would be, would the holding be reversed if any of these studies came back negative? So unless Diane, you have
No,
anything
that-
else you want to
that's
add, we want to thank you all.
So Patrick, Dan, just before we answer your question, and I'll pass that to Dan, could you tell us where you live?
Absolutely. Patrick Jutra and Diane DeMeester, and we live at 25 Augustus Street in Scotland.
Okay, I know that road, yeah. So Dan, can you answer the question that Patrick has posed?
I will do my best. Through Mr. Chair, the application of a holding provision is in fact typically used in that fashion where it puts the lands on hold in order for appropriate studies and technical review to be completed. And a subsequent application would come to this committee, which lifts that holding provision. And the holding provision is not lifted unless the County of Brant staff and council and committee are satisfied that all of those technical studies and reports meet the standards of various departments and the council's impression of what the needs of the community are.
So if they don't meet the needs, does the holding and the zoning revert back to what it was before?
Through Mr. Chair, I think we'd have to take a look at what the policies are at that time. What's the land use designation at that time? What makes the most sense in terms of there may be alternative land uses that are appropriate if the lands are designated appropriately.
Thank you.
Okay,
Thank you, Dan. I hope that helps Patrick and Diane. Thank you for joining us this evening.
Thank you.
Alicia, any other members of the public wish to speak tonight?
I do not have any more members of the public registered to speak on this item.
Okay, thank you. Well, I will ask for the sake of order a second time. If any member would like to speak to, anybody, member of the public would like to speak to this item. And finally, a third time, and hearing and seeing none, I will declare the public part of this meeting closed and pass the matter back to committee for consideration. We have a recommendation on the table from staff, a two-part recommendation. Would somebody like to move that to allow it to be on the floor? Thank you, Robert. Seconded by John Pierce.
Mr. Chairman, I am moving the first recommendation only. We can do them step by step.
That is fine. I'll take John Pierce's support also for that first recommendation. Let's deal with that one first then. Any commentary on that first recommendation? Seeing none, then I'll call the vote. All those in favour? First part carried. So we have a second motion on the table, which is about refusing another part of the application. Could somebody move that and put it on the floor? Thank you, John Pierce, seconded by Dave Miller. Comments, questions? Robert.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't support the recommendation for refusal. I think it should be approved, and I'm just going to take a couple minutes to explain why. First of all, I did allude to the Hunter subdivision, and it was, I think most people are aware of where it is now. If I read this recommendation correctly, and this was the Hunter subdivision back when, it would not be approved. And it's hard to recognize Scotland and imagine Scotland without the Hunter subdivision. It took, started about 40 years ago, as a matter of fact, and is slowly developed, and it's actually still being developed. I don't know what phase it is now, but the houses are still being built in the Hunter subdivision. So the point I'm making is that rural development is a lot different than urban development. And you have to look at this application from a rural perspective, not an urban perspective. I think all planners would agree that some growth is required to maintain the traditions, lifestyles, and well-being of a rural community. And the rural community of Scotland is not just the village of Scotland, it's the area around Scotland. A rural community, its hub maybe is a village, but it includes the surrounding area. For example, my neighbor, he lives 4 miles away from downtown Scotland, and he goes to church in Scotland. His kids go to school in Scotland. He serves on the Scotland Fire Department. The kids go to after school programs at the community center and play baseball in the park, etc. So the community is not just the village of Scotland. You have to look out for the well-being of the entire community, which is the village of Scotland and the surrounding area. And I think all planners would agree that some growth is required to maintain the well-being of the village. And I just wanted to talk about the health of the village of Scotland and some of the traditions, and please bear with me, I won't be long. Halloween used to be a really neat night in Scotland because the kids from the village and the surrounding countryside would all flock to Tony Doll's butcher shop. And the reason they did that was because he didn't give out candy, he gave out wieners, and everybody had to get their wiener, and all the kids in Scotland would run up to Tony Doll's and get that. Tony Doll's butcher shop closed, not enough business. Same thing with Urban's hardware store down the street, it closed. Hewitt's variety store across the street closed. The bowling alley and Five Pin Restaurant closed. The main business in town, maybe Hunter Lumber and Building Supplies, closed. Phil Gravel's service station and car repair closed. And this is all happening within the last 20 years. And you can see some of the effect of what's happening in the community and why we need to protect the community and try and keep it viable. The used to go get haircuts at Jim Huggins barbershop. It's closed. Jim grew up next door in Huggins family grocery store. It closed. The businesses aren't the only thing that closed. The Baptist church closed. The Anglican church closed. The St. Anthony Daniel Public School closed. Scotland Public School would have closed probably, but they closed the Oakland School instead. And the kids from Oakland now come to Scotland, and the school is still open. There used to be a couple active Boy Scout troops in Scotland. They're no longer there. Girl Guides no longer there. Masonic Lodge got torn down and moved out to make way for a parking lot for the Royal Bank, which just closed. And you can see the effect that rural communities are having. In some ways, and not only due to lack of growth, but other factors as well, they seem to be, some people say they're dying. I forgot to mention that even though the village is dying, I guess the people aren't dying because Glaive's Funeral Home also was in Scotland and it's closed. So rural villages and rural communities need some growth to survive. And just when Haley's want to perhaps help with the growth in Scotland, our planning staff is recommending refusal because of lack of services and perhaps a growth plan for the Greater Gordon Horseshoe wants communities that have different kinds of houses that can't be there without servicing. Servicing in Scotland, I can tell you right now that I don't think I'll live to see the day where water and sewers are in Scotland, and I don't think anybody here will either, because it's not warranted and it's not going to happen. The aquifer, one thing about gravel is it's a good soil conditions for septic systems, and the water is plentiful. So, Mr. Chairman, I don't support not allowing Scotland to grow. I'm going to stand up for the Village of Scotland and the Scotland community, and try to encourage my colleagues around the table to reject this recommendation for refusal and approve the recommendation, recognizing that there are, as I think the lawyers suggested, this is just a preliminary step, but if it's not done, then you can see what is going to happen to the Scotland community. And I don't want that to happen. So I'm going to stand up for the Scotland community and hopefully allow some growth like the 100 subdivision, perhaps over the next 40 years when this subdivision will probably build out. It's not like an urban developer coming in like Lozania Homes and the application we just dealt with townhouses and garages and all that kind of, it's a whole different ballgame out here in the rural areas, and we need to act and react accordingly. So those are my comments, Mr. Chairman, and I hope we can see fit to approve this application.
Thank you, Robert. I think you might have got it reversed there, but there we go. Any other commentary from committee? If not, I would like to say a couple of things. Oh, go ahead, Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and I fully support Councillor Chambers' recommendation on this. I agree that this development is not going to happen overnight. It's rural. It's needed to keep the community alive. And Robert summed it up pretty good. So there's no need for me to beat the drummer anymore. So.
Thank you. If nobody else wishes to comment, I would like to make a couple of comments, if I may. Thank you, Robert. I think you made a passionate plea for the future of Scotland. I hope that we would do the same for Burford, where we have a proposal to develop 80 new dwellings in Burford. I think I see parallels in terms of the survival of both Scotland and Burford. So I leave that one on the table. The other question, though, and perhaps more to the point, we all know that a few weeks ago, this issue of this particular piece of land came up in the new official plan draft. And by a majority of the votes of this council, we agreed that the particular piece of land, that pink piece of land, is actually not going to be developed, at least in our new official plan. It doesn't mean that in 10 years' time, when we redraft the official plan again, that this land could move in the other direction, when perhaps there is a need for additional growth. I think it just seems to be coincidental that we're pushing through something, or trying to push through something that is not mature enough for our planning department to recommend it, at the same time as we're pushing in the other direction with approval from this council to actually take this land out of the residential area and call it agricultural again. So I leave that on the table as well. So I will support the staff recommendation. There's also one other question I would have, and I should have asked it from Rishika earlier. There is a piece of land between what I now know to be the Hunter subdivision and the 5 lots that have been approved this evening. Could you share with us as a committee who owns that land and what the plans are to develop that? Because that's a piece of land that would naturally be infill.
Through you, Chair, to you if I'm allowed. I'm not sure, but
As chair, I'm allowing you to answer that question.
we have not had any discussions with the landowner who owns that piece in the middle, but your comment is correct that once this subdivision comes on board, we will have a road network shown so that that piece will be incorporated in the design as well.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to make a comment? Because if not, I'll call the question on that. Oh, Joan, you go ahead.
The only comment I want to make is short. I think in the past that council has always been very careful about down designating properties. And that is what it seems to me that we're doing here. And I don't agree with that. I think if a plan is set, that the next council can come along and say, oh, well, we don't like that, we're going to change it. And then the next council comes along and they say, okay, we don't like that, we can change it. Where's the consistency and the vision for a place if we keep doing this? So I agree that some rural growth is healthy. I know the store owner in Oakland is looking forward to the 22 families moving into the 22 lots in Oakland that were approved as rural development. So those are my comments, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Robert, go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, my problem is on my computer, I can't see everyone how they vote. So I'm going to ask that the record be logged or recorded, please.
Of course. Alicia, will you take that on? If there's no further comment, I will call the vote. And Alicia, if you can do it as a recorded vote.
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will. Just to be clear, this is the vote for the recommendation from staff. So to deny part 2.
Correct.
Councillor Chambers.
Sorry, I had my mute button on. I vote no to the recommendation.
Councillor Coleman.
No.
Councillor Gatward.
No.
Councillor Howes.
Yes.
Councillor Laferriere.
Yes.
Councillor McAlpine.
Yes.
Councillor Miller.
Yes.
Councillor Pierce.
Yes.
Councillor Wheat.
He's not here.
Oh, sorry. My apologies. Mayor Bailey.
Yes.
Councillor and Chairman Bell.
Yes.
The motion carries.
Thank you. To Courtney and to Rashika, we will take these recommendations to council in 3 weeks' time. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you. Good evening.
Moving on to the final item of the agenda. This is 241 Langford Church Road, and Dan, you're presenting again.
Still here. I will. There we go. Through you, Mr. Chair. So this is another application that you have seen before. You can ignore the staff recommendation that was left there in error. However, this is a zoning bylaw amendment application for 241 Langford Church Road. And the applicant and agent are with us this evening. So this property is located at kind of the junction of Langford Church Road, White Swan and McBay. On the south side of Langford Church Road, the property currently has an existing dwelling and a dug pond, as identified in red on your screen, having an area of approximately 2.16 hectares. The subject lands are currently designated rural residential, which is in that brown area on the left side of your screen, and the current zoning is entirely agricultural, and you can see surrounding land uses being designated agricultural, as well as rural residential, and then back to the zoning surrounding lots, residential uses, rural residential uses, and agricultural uses to the west. So the proposal this evening is a zoning bylaw amendment application. Again, kind of two parts. One is to change the zoning on the proposed lands to be severed, which is this portion to this and the south portion fronting McBay, to change the zoning from agricultural to rural residential with a special exception to permit a reduction in the minimum distance separation where minimum distance separation requirement from, or where no dwelling shall be located within 236 meters, where 259 meters is required. And this is from the neighboring livestock barn at 237 Langford Church Road, identified on your screen in the center of the circle. So in terms of this part one, the green circle, the outer ring is identifying what the requirement, the minimum distance separation requirement is from the livestock operation. And the yellow dashed line is is the proposal. So no dwelling located closer than 236 meters. There is a gray circle, the inner ring, that reflects 197 meters, and that is what would have been proposed as part of a previous information meetings. And this has since been revised. The concept plan has been revised by the applicants, again, just to reflect the change in proposed location of a dwelling. The second portion of this application, again, is just rezoning the portion of the lands with the existing dwelling, or what's identified as proposed retained lands, from agricultural to rural residential, just to implement the current rural residential land use designation as identified in the official plan. So this application is required in order to permit additional residential uses on the subject lands. It's also required to permit a 23-meter reduction in the required MDS measurement to the location of any new dwelling unit. So before we were dealing with setback distance to the property line. However, the application has been modified to reflect and restrict the location of the dwelling itself. And what this achieves is it actually controls the location of the dwelling itself. So the way that the numbers were working out before is that the dwelling could actually end up being closer to the livestock operation, but the way it's been proposed, we are restricting the location of the dwelling, and staff are of the opinion that this better maintains the intent of the minimum distance separation, which in fact is to maintain a separation between livestock and the neighboring dwellings on separate lots. So a subsequent consent application will be required in order to create the new lots. And as consideration at that time, we will be looking for proof of potable water. In this case, the applicants have confirmed that they desire to develop the lots on private cisterns, so no wells, so no impact on surrounding wells, as well as the establishment of an enhanced natural buffer in the form of trees and berms. And this would be along the property line abutting the agricultural land use, as well as the completion of an archaeological assessment on the property. So with that being said, based on technical review by various departments in the application of applicable planning policy, is my professional opinion that the application will facilitate residential development within the rural residential designation that is desirable and consistent with surrounding land uses. The reduction of the required MDS separation or minimum distance separation, or MDS, is minor and will not further restrict operations of the existing livestock facility at 237 Langford Church Road. The application is in conformity with the policies of the growth plan and consistent with provincial policy statement. This application conforms to the policies of the official plan and is in keeping with the intent of the zoning bylaw. Therefore, I am recommending to the committee that this application be approved. Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Committee, questions to Dan? John Pierce?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Dan. So Dan, the slide you had there that showed the rings and the distance and that sort of thing, can you just confirm for me? It appears as in the top left-hand corner of that, there's already a dwelling there that's within that inner ring. Is that correct?
Through Mr. Chair, that is correct. There was a lot created back in 2018, I believe, actually severed by the landowner of that agricultural livestock operation. And the way the difference between the two, how MDS is being assessed at this time, and it's the interpretation between a type A land use and a type B land use. And I can explain that further if you wish.
If you could elaborate on that a little bit, please. Thank you.
So when assessing surrounding land uses, there's a type A and a type B, or a type A less sensitive being agricultural land uses or residential uses within an agricultural area. And then there's the type B, which is a more sensitive land use, such as a settlement area or an institutional use. So historically, the interpretation of when a type A and a type B has when a type A or type B should be used has changed with ongoing consultation with OMAFRA. OMAFRA had indicated that if the land use is not agricultural, it should be a type B, more sensitive land use. So back when the application at closer to the livestock operation was applied for, it was considered a type A. Today, we consider it a type B.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Any other questions to Dan? David.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Dan. Dan, if I'm looking at it correctly, it appears to me that the one lot is okay. It's that lot that's closer that seems to be violating the MDS guidelines. Is that correct? And was discussion held with the applicant regarding, well, just go for the one severance?
Through Mr. Chair, yes, you are correct. The applicants, it does appear that they would be able to locate one dwelling outside of the required MDS. It is that desire for the second lot that is requiring this reduction in the MDS. And I had proposed multiple options, working with the applicants over the last few months to determine the best way to approach, and ultimately it is up to the applicants and their agent to put the proposal forward.
Okay, and I guess I know we've talked about, second question there, Mr. Chair. I know we've talked about it previously. At the end of the day, it comes down, I'm just asking if this is the way it works. If we talk about if there's sufficient water, we test the new lot. We don't test the neighbors, the existing neighbors well. And I guess at the end of the day, if they run dry, they run dry, and we go on. Like we don't really have any options, I guess. Or do we?
Through Mr. Chair, the discussion on versus a well or a cistern, I've had with our building division, and the water quality is a known issue in this area. And the applicants have acknowledged that, and perhaps Mr. Phillips can elaborate a little further. Our building division has no issues with the establishment of a cistern on this property to provide well, and notifying potential or future owners of this property. I think I included it in my staff report. That's something that we can include in a development agreement at the time of the lot creation. And that development agreement would be registered on title.
Okay, and I appreciate the answer, Dan. And the reason I bring that up is because every time we have an application in this area, water is brought up every single time, and this one's no different if everybody's read the package. So I appreciate the answer.
Thank you, Dan. Joan, you had a question.
Yes, my question is with respect to the water and the cisterns that the applicant has said that they're going to put in. A lot of homes use cisterns for a backup system because cisterns are groundwater that goes into the feeds the cistern. But how can we be assured that that cistern water is potable water? We can't. I don't believe. The only way we can is if these people buy water from a treated source, a water company or whatever, and have it delivered to their home. And I don't know that that's the most ideal situation for these big rural lots where people want to build 4 or 5 bedroom homes and large homes.
Joan, is there a question there? Just put it in the form of a question.
Yeah, my question is, how can the county of Brant consider cistern water potable water?
Thank you.
And will they depend these homes on delivery of purchased water?
Dan?
Through Mr. Chair, I think that's a great question. I don't know if I have the information to answer accurately. I don't know if Mr. Phillips could answer during his presentation. I also see Mr. Vaughn has joined us. He might be able to save me.
Matt, do you have an answer? Or I can leave it to Bob Phillips later.
Through the chair, I do know that through the building code, potable water can be considered delivered water, and typically delivered water, it can be put into a cistern, it can be put into a storage tank. So I do believe the building code does allow that as a potable water source, but I'm also happy to let Bob have a crack at that too.
Okay, we're going to get to Bob in a second. Any other questions for Dan before we leave him? Saying none, thank you, Dan. We will go to the agent of the applicant, and I think the applicants themselves are here as well. Who is going to speak? Is it Bob?
I'll speak first. The owners can speak if they like. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Mayor Bailey, members of the committee, Bob Phillips from Cahoon Engineering. This is an application that's before you to implement the requirements of the official plan for a rural residential type zoning. We are proposing a reduction in the MDS setback that is required. And I'm pleased I'm not an MDS specialist, but as I understand, this reduction is minor in nature in that the setbacks to the existing residential development is much less than what's being proposed for this site. We have worked with county staff, and Dan, you did a great job with the presentation tonight. to facilitate a second building lot here. And it's desirous of the owner to actually build their own home on severed parcel number 1. So they created sort of a building area on that adjacent to the pond. And we're seeking support of the committee tonight. With respect to cisterns, yes, they are permitted under the building code, and we have verified that through the building department. And I would find it strange, Councillor Gatwood, that somebody would actually bring in non-potable water. If you're going to go out and purchase water, I would expect it to be potable water. And you know, obviously there's known quality issues of the water in this area, and that's why we have selected the cistern option in this case, so that we're not impacting any wells in the area, as we do appreciate the neighbors are sensitive. I'm happy to answer any questions anybody might have. Other than that, we're just seeking your approval tonight. Thank you.
Questions for Bob? Joan, go ahead.
Certainly, I wasn't suggesting, through you, Mr. Chair, that somebody buy non-potable water, but I was suggesting that some cisterns rely on groundwater, which, if it's not potable, and they use that for watering their gardens and so on and so forth. But certainly that groundwater can be non-potable and also have issues. So that's what I was referring to. And I'm happy to hear that our building code, our Ontario building code, allows cisterns with purchased water as a source of drinking water for a home, because a home isn't much good without good water. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Joan. Do Veronica and John want to say anything at this stage, or are you just happy to answer questions as well?
Yes, I would like to say something.
Go ahead.
Okay, I am the, good evening, Mayor and Councillors. I am the owner of the 241 Langford Church. My name is John, my wife is Veronica. And regarding to the water issue, I am in the water treatment business. In 10 years since we live here, I have a cistern and I never ever use the 2 wells on my property. I'm collecting the water from the roof, the rainwater, and the water around the house through my sump pump. I have ultraviolet light for the bacteria, and I'm using a reverse osmosis for drinking. And in 10 years, this is all what we drink and never ever had an issue with it. And this is what I am intended to with the new building. So I never use the well water because it's poor quality, full of sulfur and iron. Even if I am able to treat it, I didn't bother with it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, John. So any questions to Bob or John and Veronica? Seeing none, I'll open this matter up then to the public. Alicia, do we have anybody on the line that wishes to speak to this matter?
We do, Mr. Chairman. We have a Bruce and Marion Harschnitz.
Thank you very much. Bruce, welcome back.
Thank you.
Perhaps you could just share with us your address, just the record.
Thank you, Councillor, Chair, and Mayor Bailey. I am Bruce Harschnitz. I live directly east of the subject lands at 417 McBay Road. So across the road from the subject property that would front onto McBay.
Thank you.
I have spoken to this group before, and I appreciate being allowed to be a delegation regarding this application again. Just before I get started with the one question I have to initiate, just to answer Councillor Pierce's question. I'm not sure if Dan understood the question exactly, Councillor Pierce, but you asked if there was another house on the top left of that diagram. And yes, there was. It shows up in this aerial photograph. What does not show up is the house located in the lot that's marked there at 239 Langford Church Road. And then there's the residence of the subject property. So within the MDS circle, there are actually now 4 residences already in existence to take into consideration. I would like to finally ask that this application be deferred to the next planning committee meeting to allow a bit more time for an appropriate response to this application. It seems to, as stated earlier for 8.1 and one of the other ones, there hasn't really been enough time with the holiday break and the late submission of information to concerned residents to be able to put together a really coordinated and full-hearted response. There's also a couple other reasons that I asked specifically for this one to be deferred so that a better response can be prepared. The initial information package was received after the middle of December, and the information looked similar to the package that had been received for the September meeting, which we found out was deferred when we logged on to make a presentation at that time. So we were informed at that time that the application had been withdrawn because the applicant was making changes. So when we got that first package now, after the middle of December, we thought, well, it doesn't look like there's been any changes. A little bit later in December, closer to Christmas now, we received another package regarding the same application with totally different mapping from which we could not even read some of the figures because the print was so small. So we couldn't see the actual numbers and what they were referring to. And then the county offices were closed for the Christmas break, which made it difficult to get any information. We did email in the request to be a delegation. We revamped a little bit of the submission that we'd sent in September. And I thank Dan for responding on Monday when he was back in the office, but we didn't have a chance to touch base with him any further to find out more information or get clarification. So the additional information was only received yesterday, and to go through all the documents that were linked to it in Dan's report, which is 19 pages long, which he compressed to a good presentation on screen now for you, it takes a little bit of time to be able to sift through it and come up with a really good and understandable response to talk knowledgeably about it. The information in the packages and the agenda for tonight's meeting was also confusing. The documents received made no mention of the subject land contained in the human-made pond potentially being severed into 2 lots. When we were told that it had come or been removed in September because they were making changes, we thought, okay, we'll see what happens. When we got the second package and you look at map 3 aerial imagery from 2020, it shows the subject property, 241 Langford Church Road, divided into 2 large parcels, which led us to believe that the change that they were seeking was to simply divide or eventually sever the property into the existing residence and the larger subject property with the human dug pond, and create 2 large parcels. If we don't have the option to defer this to a later meeting to have a bit more time, I can go through with a presentation. It may be a bit disjointed, and I apologize for that. So is that something that would be considered at this time?
Bruce, just as a measure, we go through 298 pages of materials in preparation for this meeting. So okay. I think we would like to see you go through your presentation and decide this matter tonight. So if you want, I'll give you the full 10 minutes back if you need it.
Well, I appreciate everyone sticking by, because now it's been, let's see, 3 hours and 40 minutes practically that we've been going through all these things, and there have been a number of contentious ones. I did submit a submission which covered much of what I had submitted back in September, and I'm not going to go through every single comment in there right now because it's there for you to read. As I said, with the Planner Namizniak's report, I did skim through it and get through some of it. It does take a little while. There were a couple of extra points that I noticed while scanning through it. First one, it notes in the executive summary that the agricultural facility located at 237 Langford Church Road is already restricted by the existing lot of record at 239 Langford Church. That was the property that was designated in 2018 before they sat down with the Ministry of Ag and Food to get clarification on how the MDS setback should be calculated. So at that time, it was determined that they used the type A land use for versus more sensitive type B land use. So there was a bit of a mistake there that allowed that lot to go through, which now puts on an inaccurate restrictions on the ag operation. This past misinterpretation should not be carried forward to allow rezoning of the subject's lands in this application by saying that the agricultural operation is restricted by the creation of lot at 239 Langford Church Road. If that lot had not been created and caused that now false restriction on the ag operation may have been able to expand, and we would not be looking at a application to permit an exemption. On page 4 of the report, it also states the proposal represents a minor rounding out of development as the proposal is adjacent to existing residential land uses. When I think of adjacent to, I think of beside. The proposal where these two lots are going to be severed are going to be facing McBay Road. Their address will be an even number on McBay Road. There are no residential properties adjacent to where these new severed properties are projected to be. The closest property on Langford Church Road between Langford Church, Baptist Church, McBay intersection to the south is over 300 meters away. So it's a bit inaccurate to say that the two new properties will be adjacent to existing residential land uses. We and the other property owners moved here for the rural aspect of life in this area. Our enjoyment will be severely affected by this proposal, as any future severance of the property will place a massive house directly across from us. And we can show you a massive house that's being built 3 properties west of us. And it's a huge 2-story mansion with 2-car garages on either side of the entrance hall. And if that type of building, which could easily be placed on these potentially severed properties, goes in, it will seriously impinge on our enjoyment of the area. We also, when we expressed opposition to 239 Langford Church Road being put in, we came to this committee and spoke on that. We were assured by the members around the table, the councillors, some of you are still here, that the residential development on the west side of McBay Road was something we didn't have to worry about since it wasn't zoned for it. I realize in one plan it shows brown, and in zoning it's agricultural. And the idea here is to match the zoning with the brown mark that was put on the map in the past. Maybe, just maybe, the official plan may not be the most accurate and maybe shouldn't have been painted brown, and it should still remain as agricultural. Another concern is actually with the MDS calculation and the reference point for the start of the measurement. If you could bring up that slide, Dan, I don't know if you can, to show those circles, but we appreciate trying to say you're not going to build a house closer than a certain distance from the agricultural facility. But by doing that, it means that any residential development will be closer to McVeigh Road and impinge even more significantly on the view that we appreciate and we have come to enjoy by living here for over 12 years. In the MDS calculations, the measurement is from one of the large barns. But in the actual MDS report that's part of the package that is accessible from the agenda, the MDS report itself says there are 6 box stalls in the smaller building to the south of the large barn. By using that calculation where there are livestock located, it would make a greater request than this minor variance that they're requesting right now. That basically concludes my presentation. I don't want to take up any of more of your time. I'm not sure where I got to with the 10 minutes. I apologize if I'm over, but we've been here, I think, long enough. We're trying to preserve agricultural, rural views around the county. I can see by 2 of the earlier applications that that's what other agricultural owners are trying to do, where they requested zoning that prohibited residential development on the agricultural lands that they were severing from their residents. So they've got the foresight to ask for a permission or to prevent
Bruce,
development on zoning.
If I may stop you there, they're obliged to do that. They don't have a choice. So I think you're making an unfair and inappropriate comparison.
I apologize for that part, but
I'm going to suggest that we ask if any members of our committee would like to ask questions for clarification from you. And I would ask Dan just to confirm that the OP that we see in your pack is indeed correct, because I mean, if we cannot believe the OP, then we're off to a bad start on this one. Dan, can you just confirm that OP is correct?
Through you, Mr. Chair, that is a screenshot of our current official plan mapping, and it is correct.
So Bruce, that's where we start our discussions from. Any questions to Bruce? If not, Bruce, I thank you for staying with us. You will be the last of the delegates, and you, of course, stay with us to the end of the story. Alicia, are there any other members of the community that would like to speak to this?
I do not have any other members of the public registered to speak on this item.
Thank you. I will ask a second time if anybody would like to speak to this item on 241 Langford Church Road. And finally, a third time, seeing none, I will close this public part of the meeting and pass the matter back to committee for consideration. Would somebody like to make a motion to put the recommendation on the table? John Pierce, thank you. Seconded by Steve Howes, thank you. Commentary. Brian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will not be supporting this recommendation. I've had problems with it from the get-go, back in even before September when it was first brought to us for an information meeting. And I have a bigger concern with it now because the MDS. It looks like we keep creating 2 different rules in this municipality for MDS. And I'm not trying to bring up one that happened here a while ago, but we got, I know, I see you're shaking your head, Mr. Mayor. I just don't like the way it's going. So I will not be supporting it due to this MDS problem.
Thank you, Brian. Any other comments before I call the vote? David.
It's interesting that this wouldn't even be before us if they weren't going for 2 lots. Because they could have gone for 1. So I don't know. It's a tough one. I appreciate what Councillor Coleman said, because I realize MDS are more guidelines than anything. They're not written in stone, but at the same time, they are there for a reason. I guess we talked about earlier, if the existing livestock operation wants to expand, they're constrained, but why constrain them anymore, I guess. So it's unfortunate that before us is two, when we know one could have flew for.
Yep. David,
I'd like a recorded vote, please.
of course. Alicia, you got that message?
Yes,
Hi,
I have,
Alicia.
Mr. Chairman. Yep.
Okay, if you could, if in the absence of any other commentary, I will call a vote, and it is a recorded vote. And over to you, Alicia.
Okay, Mayor Bailey,
I don't support the recommendation.
Councillor Bell, Chairman Bell,
No, I don't support the recommendation.
Councillor Chambers,
No.
Councillor Coleman,
No.
Councillor Gatward,
No.
Councillor Howes,
No.
Councillor LaFerriere,
No, thank you.
Councillor McAlpine,
No.
Councillor Miller,
No.
Councillor Pierce.
No.
The motion fails.
Thank you, Alicia. So we need to make I guess, another motion to bring forward to the council. So Brian, are you going to make a motion?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll move that this request be denied.
Seconded by Mayor Bailey. Any commentary? If not, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Motion carried. So to Veronica and John and to Bob, thank you for coming tonight. You heard the result of the vote from the committee. It will be taken to council for ratification in 3 weeks' time. So thank you once again. That brings us, I think, to the end of section 8, the public hearing. Moving through the agenda, we have no consent items. We have no staff reports. We have no communications. We have no other business unless anybody would like, on reflection, to add other business. Do we have an in-camera? Do we need to go in camera, Alicia?
We do not, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. That brings us then to the point of adjournment. The next meeting will be on the first Tuesday of February. I thank everybody for staying with us this evening. Have a good evening.
Good night, all.